Welcome, everybody, to the Brickyard podcast, the best show on the internet, according to the Brickyard. We're going into all the games. We're going to recap all of the games that happened in Week 14, give our insights. Let's start with the Patriots and Steelers game on Thursday night. Patriots, for the first time in a month, score more than 21 points, score more than all they did the entire month of December, facing against the Steelers. Steelers losing back-to-back games against teams below 500. The first team in NFL history to lose back-to-back games against teams that are 8 games below 500. The Pittsburgh Steelers. The first segment of the game talking about the lowly Pittsburgh Steelers, dare I say it.
Yeah, the lowly Pittsburgh Steelers. And there's so much bad with this Pittsburgh Steelers team to break down. It's like this game was over in the first half because we know one thing about this Patriots team is that their defense is always going to be really good, especially when it comes to November and December. And Bill Belichick is going to be able to make you play left-handed. He's going to make you really uncomfortable. And then one thing I said coming into this game, I said, I don't have the guts and I don't have the glory to really seize the prediction that the Patriots are going to upset the Steelers just because the Patriots have not been able to score points. I'm like, okay, a team that can't score points going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh, even though I know the history there with Bill Belichick, you're a history buff. You know the history of Bill Belichick versus Mike Tomlin himself. Just do it. That's what Bill Belichick said. And then in this game, I was like, okay, but the Steelers defense should be able to slow down a fossilized Ezekiel Elliott, right? No, Zeke went out there. Zeke munched 140 yards. No Ramondre Stevenson. No problem. And the Patriots are like, Ezekiel Elliott, I don't know. Maybe at the end of the year, he's some guy that has some haspucha, that spotza. You know what I mean? In New Jersey, they got the DeVito. We got the Elliott now. And then I was like, okay, well, you should at least be able to stop Hunter Henry, right? No. Hunter Henry cooked in this game. Okay. You should at least be able to stop Juju Smith-Schuster, right? No. Juju Smith-Schuster cooked in this game. So it was like, with all of that being said, with how bad the Steelers offense looks with Mitch Trubisky, I was like, the Steelers defense, though, TJ Watt, Highsmith, gets absolutely cooked and embarrassed in the first half. And then the second half, Bill O'Brien definitely changed the play calling, was trying not to lose. And I don't blame him, especially when you have a chance to win on Thursday Night Football on a short week. But the problem with these Mike Tomlin teams is I feel like sometimes they just aren't ready to play in the big spots, especially on defense. I feel like there's some years their defense looks elite and really good, and the Steelers defense has been able to make some plays in big moments when it matters with TJ Watt and Highsmith, but it also has the ability to get cooked on any given day randomly. And then sometimes you're like, okay, where is this top NFL defense, especially on a Thursday Night Football on a short week to prepare versus Bailey Zappi? But Bill Belichick knows that Mike Tomlin likes playing zone defense and he knows how to expose that. And that's exactly what the Patriots did. So it's like the Patriots did win, but how does Mitch Trubisky look worse than Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and Bailey Zappi combined? And the fact that the Bears traded up to get this guy in the same draft as Patrick Mahomes, I think everyone should apologize to Matt Nagy after seeing what we saw on Thursday Night Football with Mitch Trubisky, because Matt Nagy was the one who's like, you know what? I want to start Andy Dalton. I did not want this kid. The front office wanted to trade up for him. It's the Chicago Bears. Yeah, I'm sure you guys know what you're doing at quarterback, right? And Matt Nagy got crucified for starting Andy Dalton. And people are like, how can you not start Mitch Trubisky? Then Matt Nagy dragged Mitch Trubisky to the playoffs. Almost won a playoff game if it wasn't for Cody Parkey. But the fact that he made Mitch Trubisky look that good, and on the Steelers, he looks like he's never played football in his life. It's like, hey, you played rugby. Do you want to play quarterback for us? Sure. It's like the guy doesn't have the demeanor of a franchise quarterback. And my first personal trainer I had actually went to UNC with him, and he was at a couple frat parties, and he's like, this guy was just not franchise quarterback material in the NFL. And he knew that in college, that it wouldn't pan out.
When I watch Mitch Trubisky play, he looks almost soulless. His face is blank. He looks like there's no emotions on his face. And I know there are other players in the NFL that have that emotionless face, and it's to their advantage. Someone like a Joe Burrow, someone like a Patrick Mahomes. This guy, he looks dull. He looks like he can't play at the high level. But the Steelers, right?
Yeah.
They gave Lamar Jackson fits. Lamar Jackson, who some put in the MVP race. Not I, not you, but other people do. They make Lamar Jackson look like a living hell. But yet, they give Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray cooks them. And then this game, Bailey Zappi, a guy who the Patriots don't know whether to start him. They don't know whether to cut him. They don't know whether to put him on the practice squad. But for some reason, when it came time to play him on Thursday night against the Steelers, Bailey Zappi looked like a starting quarterback. And now, New England fans have to brace it when they turn on Wiggy, or they turn on Felger and Maz, or they turn on whatever Boston sports radio saying, oh, is Bailey Zappi the answer? No, he's not the answer. Please. It's one game, please. And the thing is, the Patriots are dumb enough to think that that might be the case. So fuck you, Mike Tomlin. Fuck the Steelers, because you know what they did? They gave Patriots fans hope.
Yeah.
False hope. You know what's worse than real hope or expectations and getting crushed is having false hope. Thinking Bailey Zappi is going to be the guy. Thinking that Zeke Elliott, by the way, he started when I was a freshman in high school, by the way.
Yeah.
I am now a 25-year-old man, and he is, what is he now, 32 at this point?
Oh.
The ageless wonder. He went out and he balled against the Pittsburgh Steelers without Ramondre Stevenson, an offensive line that has struggled all season. But yet, when the Steelers come to town, Bill Belichick has it marked on his calendar. He's 10-3 against them all time. He owns him. And the Steelers, this is your year. You're in the playoffs. You're still in the playoffs after this, after losing to two of the worst teams, two perennial bottom 5 teams, according to the Brickyard. How do you do this? Like I mentioned, the first team in NFL history to lose back-to-back games against teams that are 8 games below 500. That is unheard of. You should not be in the playoffs. You should be disqualified after that. You have George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, 2 good running backs. And for some reason, even the jump from Kenny Pickett to Mitch Trubisky, even that jump, they look abysmal. They couldn't do anything.
Yeah, the jump from Kenny Pickett to Mitch Trubisky is bizarre to me because Mitch Trubisky is horrific and Kenny Pickett is no better, where Joe Flacco is 1 touchdown away from passing Kenny Pickett already for touchdowns. Danny DeVito has already passed him in East Rutherford, New Jersey, with the Giants over there. So it's like with Kenny Pickett, he's kind of an enigma, but at the end of the day, he does get some drives at the end of it, and their offense does look better with him, but their offense just isn't explosive, and it's not the same Steelers. Like, you shouldn't look worse with Mitch Trubisky than with Ben Roethlisberger when Ben Roethlisberger couldn't throw a football, you know, because you still made the playoffs when Ben Roethlisberger was there. And then you made it to a playoff game, I believe. I don't think they were playing in Cleveland. I think Cleveland went to Pittsburgh and beat them. You still won your division that year, but it's like the Steelers have always had these games versus worse teams where they kind of play down to your competition. That's always been the knock on Mike Tomlin, is that sometimes his teams play down to his competition. He's not great at getting offensive coordinators. And then he was kind of given a ready-made Super Bowl roster and then told not to mess it up. And he is a good head coach, but there are times where the head coaching is definitely lacking there, and it's not as good as it could be. Especially, he's took way too long to fire Matt Canada, and basically the front office told him to fire Matt Canada, and they had to tell Mike Tomlin to do that. So how long is Mike Tomlin also going to say, like, okay, I'm fine just staying in Pittsburgh, like, year in and year out? Like, do you think he thinks it's like a good gig just chilling there, or do you think he's maybe ready for a change of scenery?
That's a thing where I'm not entirely sure. He's been there for 15 years, and I feel like the Steelers for the last decade, you know, they've had a lot of talent. They had, obviously, Le'Veon and Antonio Brown back in the day. But ever since Antonio Brown left, their offense has slowly started to peter off into one of the worst in the NFL. I called them the Guantanamo Bay Steelers earlier this year, and at one point I thought we graduated from that, but nope, they're back in Guantanamo. They rested there and built their foundation there. As far as moving, I don't know where he would go.
Yeah.
Because I think he likes building the defense from the ground up. The defense, for the most part this year, has been fine, but it's their offense to me. Like, what is going on offensively? Because I see talent everywhere, but for some reason, it just never clicks. And it hasn't clicked since Big Ben was there.
Well, for me, I think the defense is a problem because you shouldn't get cooked by a Patriots team that hasn't scored more than 10 points in the past 3 games in Pittsburgh. And then you allow 21 points in the first half. Like, that's something that's inexcusable, especially against Arizona, too. These are 2 home games that you lost to two of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah. And plus, Patriots have scored 13 points 3 games prior.
Yeah.
Total, combined. And then they face the Steelers with TJ Watt, with Alex Highsmith, with Joey Porter Jr., and they fry them. Their offense moves way. The funny part is, entering this game, I'm like, I don't know if I can watch this as a Patriots fan. Patriots, how anemic they've been on offense. I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch this game. You know, we're so excited about football to start the season. And then we get to weeks like this where you see Mitch Trubisky versus Bailey Zappi. I'm like, I don't know if I can watch this 7-6 game that's about to unfold. And then I see first drive of the game, they get a touchdown. I'm like, huh, interesting. Second drive, they get a touchdown. I'm like, what is happening? Are the Patriots actually going to win this game? And the Patriots fans shouldn't want to win this game. But they win. Bill Belichick gets his win against one of his coaches, and it is inexcusable. They should not have given up 21 points. They shouldn't have given up 10 points to the Patriots. The Patriots offense is terrible. But yeah, here we are talking about this game.
Yeah, here we are talking about this game. And then I surf the interwebs a little bit. I go into like some Patriots fan groups, like group chats and like different like fan bases just to see what their sentiment is about their team. And then I've been in a few Patriots group chats surveying the comments, and some people are like, we should get Caleb Williams and fix our quarterback position. That'd be nice, right? And then Patriots fans are just like, no, is he gonna cry this time? And they're just like holding the situation of him crying, and they're like, oh, we need to go out there. And then you said the Patriots were gonna draft Bo Nix, and then Patriots fans actually want Bo Nix, and then they don't want Caleb Williams. They think Caleb Williams is a crybaby. They don't think he's a franchise quarterback. And they don't want him. They don't want him. They don't want Caleb Williams.
This is the problem with Patriots fan bases. They don't watch other games.
Yeah.
So they don't know other quarterbacks. There was a reason why they were comparing Mac Jones to Josh Allen for a while. Say what you will about Josh Allen. He does throw it to the other team a lot. He's got a lot of turnovers. That is insane on a molecular level.
Yeah.
Like, ridiculous. Patriots fans, like I said, they only watch Patriots games, so they only know what the Patriots are. So they think Hunter Henry is better than Travis Kelce. They think that Mac Jones is equivalent to Josh Allen.
I saw another one. It was like, oh, even how bad Tyquan Thornton has been, I would still rather have him than a crybaby like George Pickens who just complains on the sideline the whole time.
George Pickens could catch, though. He can catch the football. Tyquan Thornton, catch percentage of 46%. That's who you want. A guy who flip a coin. Oh, tails, doesn't catch it. Oh, heads. Oh, caught it this time.
Yeah.
He has more receiving yards. George Pickens had more receiving yards in 4 games this year than Tyquan Thornton has had his entire career. But yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm glad you guys have Tyquan Thornton.
Yeah.
Definitely makes your offense move a lot better. Consider you guys are 30th in points for.
Yeah, 30th. That's insane. But yeah, so Patriots, they're still eliminated, but again, they're winning games they shouldn't win here. And then the Steelers, this game was like, okay, I don't want to see them in the playoffs. I want to see the wild card teams as the Browns, Colts, and Bengals here. I think that would be the most entertaining for the NFL at this point. And then speaking of the Colts and the Bengals, we had the Bengals winning this game, thought the Colts were due for a loss here. And then Jake Browning comes out again, balls out at home. So it looks like the Bengals are going to make a legitimate push for the playoffs here. Do you have any hope that they're going to make the playoffs here? Or do you think they're just going to play some upset ball at the end of the year?
I think they still can. I mean, we can look at their schedule later, but I think they have a good defense. They have a good coach, Zach Taylor, who doesn't get the respect he deserves. And then Jake Browning, I mean, he started this game, I think, 11 of 11. And then he did get banged up a little bit. I think he should be back for next week. But this is a team that you still have a lot of talent on offense. So I think they can definitely squeak into the playoffs considering what their schedule could be.
Yeah, and for the Bengals, they're a team that has a lot of weapons here, and they make it easy. The rookie running back they drafted this year has been electric. Had a few screen passes where he looked really good. Joe Mixon has stepped up since Joe Burrow went out, and then just with how good Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are, it's going to make it really easy for a young quarterback like that. And then Jake Browning's also really old. Like they were showing a video of him. Forget the college championship. Oh, it was him.
Washington versus Washington State.
It was him playing Gardner Minshew. Yeah. So it's like he's at a point where he's been in college for a while. He's one of those, when you talk about NFL ready quarterbacks, he's been playing football for a while at the college level, and then he could sit behind, learn from Joe Burrow. He has him in his ear all day, and then he can rely on a good defense as well. So that means he doesn't really have to push the ball, so he can kind of play cool, calm, and collected. And the best thing about him is he just doesn't look rattled. And then for a Cincinnati Bengals team with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and now you have a solid 1-2 punch in your backfield, and you still have Coach Lou Anarumo. Like, this is going to be an extremely dangerous team down the stretch, especially the Colts were flying high. They had just beaten the Titans in Tennessee, which is no easy task, and then being able to just beat them handedly at home. And I feel like this was a good win for them, and they beat them the way they should have, because the Colts are really good, but I feel like Cincinnati's defense just takes it to a different level at home, and they're going to be a problem, especially if they sneak into that wild card spot. If they match up with Kansas City, I mean, the Bengals without Joe Burrow going into Arrowhead again,
that would be iconic.
I don't know, because like a team like the Chiefs, where their offense has looked so bad, they already proved they could go to Jacksonville and win. Even with Trevor, the game was still neck and neck.
Yeah, so here's the schedule in the next 4 games, right? They face the Vikings next week, which we're going to go over the Vikings and Raiders game. Maybe the worst game of the year. Then they face the Steelers, who have just lost to 2 of the worst teams with a combined record of 6-20. Then they face the Chiefs on New Year's Eve. Then they face the Browns to end it. So, I mean, I think at worst they can be 9-7 or 9-8 if that's the record. So I think they can win at least 2 of those games, but they can definitely win 3 of them.
Yeah.
So that would propel them in a playoff spot for sure. I think they're a team that, because of they have nothing really to lose, and this is already considered a lost season of many people in the NFL. But if Jake Browning could go into the playoffs and face off against the Chiefs or face off against a team like the Dolphins, maybe, I don't know. Anything can happen. It's the NFL.
Yeah, it's the NFL. Anything can happen, especially a team like the Dolphins. Then we'll get to them. But like all of these division leaders right now, their offense has looked anemic at times. And the Bengals offense has probably looked like one of the best in the AFC the past 2 weeks. You just went to Jacksonville, you lit them up, and then they were able to be competitive with Cleveland at home. And then you light up Indianapolis, whose defense has been playing well at times. And then you still have all of those weapons here. You still have Zach Taylor, who's one of the better coaches in the league. I think if you make the playoffs, Zach Taylor definitely has a case to be coach of the year, especially if we're going to shout out someone like Shane Steichen for making it for a wild card, or someone like Brian Daboll. The fact that he's been able to bring a backup quarterback, and the team seems like they haven't missed a beat. They've almost gotten better the past few weeks. In that one really bad game, I was like, okay, it was versus Pittsburgh, and it was his first NFL game, and that's a tough AFC North rivalry. It's a very, talk about entering in the NFL through the fire.
Yeah. No, I think they can play a lot of upset ball, and we should see them winning with a winning record. And give a lot of credit to Zach Taylor. He's one of those guys who doesn't get a lot of credit. He's beaten Patrick Mahomes. He's made it to a title. And, at that Super Bowl also, I think that there was a lot of plays there where they could have definitely won. So he's one of those guys. I feel like he's always kind of disrespected because he has so much talent on that team.
Yeah.
But Zach Taylor deserves to be credited as a high level coach in the NFL. And I think that winning these games is going to help his case.
Yeah, I think definitely winning these games, especially if they do squeak into the playoffs, I think they can beat the Chiefs because that's really the Chiefs' last tough game. So I think that'll be a really interesting test for the Bengals. But so far, hopefully they can make the playoffs, play some upset ball. It'll make it really interesting, because if they beat the Chiefs, that would knock them down on the same level as Denver.
Yeah.
Okay. Things are getting real interesting. And especially, we had another game, Zach Wilson thrown back out there starting. So I want to talk about Robert Saleh, though, because he's been having a little back and forth with the media. So basically, Robert Saleh is like, okay, I'm getting crushed for starting Zach Wilson. All right, so I'm going to bench Zach Wilson. And then everyone is crushing me for not playing Zach Wilson and playing Tim Boyle and playing Trevor Siemian. So I'm going to bring a briefcase of notes and open it up and be like, this is all of the head coaches in the NFL without their franchise quarterback. Guess what, guys? None of them did well. And then you're like, okay, that's great, Robert. And then they're like, why aren't you starting Zach Wilson? And he's like, I don't know. I just don't know if I'm there yet, where I'm at the point where I can trust him enough to put him back out in the game. I just have, I have a lot of things I need to figure out. And then has a meeting with Zach Wilson, ends up starting him. And then before the game, Zach Wilson's like, what's the worst that can happen? they're going to bench me. And then Zach Wilson goes out there against a very good Houston Texans defense and balls out. I mean, he goes for 300 yards, has one of probably his best game of the season. Garrett Wilson has a great game. They didn't really have a great running game going, and he was able to go out there and then tear up a defense that has been giving a lot of teams nightmares, especially with their pass rush, and the Jets' offensive line hasn't been very good this year. The fact that he was able to go out there, spotlight on him. All right, we benched you. What do you have? And then he goes out there and has one of the best games of his career. I think something really special to see.
Yeah. And I mean, here are his numbers, right? 27 of 36, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks, 117 QBR. Really, outside of the fumble, he played about as perfect of a game as he possibly could. And again, this is against Will Anderson, Derek Stingley Jr., all the guys that are over on that Texans defense that we've been applauding all year. And give credit to him. Garrett Wilson had 100 yards. Not a lot done on the run game either, but he went out there and balled. And I think that for him, like having kind of low expectations, just kind of playing with nothing left to lose.
Yeah.
At this point, like I think there was a lot of pressure on him beginning of the season when Aaron Rodgers goes down. You know, he's struggling. He's facing teams like the Cowboys, the Patriots, all these tough defenses. A lot of pressure on him. But now that he's been benched and that he's played back again, he's like, I have nothing left to lose at this point. Who cares what happens at this point? So he went out there and balled. He made some good throws in this game, and credit to Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I think Zach Wilson went out there and played really well, and especially with everything with Robert Saleh. And I feel like Robert Saleh is just playing kind of the game with the media poorly, because it seems like he's almost admitting to letting the media dictate some of his decisions, which I don't like at all. And with the media's main criticism with you starting Zach Wilson was not that you weren't starting Tim Boyle. It's not that you weren't starting Trevor Siemian. It's that, hello, Joe Flacco, are you there? Okay. You're in Cleveland. You're balling out now. You already have better numbers than Kenny Pickett has had all season. Can you come save us? Because you've played better than Zach Wilson at times. Carson Wentz, is he better than Zach Wilson? I think everyone can agree with that. Robert Griffin III, are you up? Okay, you don't need to call Robert Griffin, but you get the point. It's like with Robert Saleh, it feels like he's letting the media dictate him, and it seems like he's coming at it. I don't want to say it's a place of insecurity, but he definitely seems like he let the media get in his head, and that was the reason why he benched Zach Wilson, which if you're a head coach, that's almost like, okay, you seem like you're not sure of yourself, and that's going to start to creep into the minds of players in the locker room. The fact that Zach Wilson's openly like, oh, were they going to do bench me to other players? So then you're kind of creating almost a divide and creating more dysfunction.
Yeah, I agree. Plus, you know, I understand why he benched Zach Wilson, right? But the problem is that they didn't go out there and get another guy. Tim Boyle is not the guy. We all know that. Trevor Siemian's not the guy. You have all this opportunity in the offseason to get a solid backup, because Zach Wilson maybe shouldn't have even been on the team this year. You should have tried to trade him or maybe cut him. I just don't know if he would have been good for the locker room with Aaron Rodgers in there. But I think that's been the big criticism of Robert Saleh all year. It's been his decision-making with the quarterback position. First, Zach Wilson's in, then they bench him, then they bring in Tim Boyle, and then they bring him back. It's like, if he were to be fired this year, it's going to be because of this situation here. Yeah. Which I think he'd still deserve a second opportunity, because I think he's done a good job in New York for the most part. That defense, the way he's built it up, gives a lot of credit there. But if he were to get fired this year, we're going to point to the Zach Wilson situation, the quarterback situation, or not calling up some of these guys who are clearly better, just sitting on their couches at home, who have played better than Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson struggles. All right, cool. Let's go out there and get somebody like Carson Wentz, like Joe Flacco. You haven't seen Carson Wentz this year, but you've seen Joe Flacco go out there within 3 games with the Browns and play great football, turning back the clock.
Yeah. Do you think this is more Aaron Rodgers doesn't want another guy there because he kind of wanted the allure he was going to come back, and he doesn't really want another veteran quarterback, and he wants to kind of like remake Zach Wilson? Or do you think it's more just the Jets as a whole being dysfunctional and not being able to make correct decisions at the quarterback position over the past 20 years?
Last forever, yes.
Last forever.
I think it's the Jets, because you go down the assembly line of quarterbacks they've had always, even like Brett Favre and the dysfunction there. Like, I think it speaks more to the Jets and how they've been for their entire franchise. Up until Ryan Fitzpatrick, no other quarterback has had 4,000 yards of a season.
Yeah.
The only team left is the Bears, who haven't thrown for 4,000 yards. Their quarterbacks have been anemic. I just don't think They bring in Tim Boyle because of Aaron Rodgers. They bring in, I think they signed Trevor Siemian later on, but their decision making at the quarterback level, I do think there's a little bit of Aaron Rodgers there. Like, I don't think Aaron Rodgers would want someone like Gardner Minshew there or somebody who can start.
Yeah.
Because obviously that puts pressure on him. But ultimately, like, after he goes down, it shouldn't matter what Aaron Rodgers says. You need to still win games. And if you have someone like Carson Wentz there, maybe they're out of the race, kind of, but they're still more competitive. What are they, 5-8 now? They could have at least been 6-7 or 7-6, where pretty much everybody else is.
Yeah, I think Carson Wentz definitely could have got you another game there for sure. Because it's like the defense has been really good in New York, which was my worry about Houston going to play the Jets in East Rutherford, New Jersey, not New York there, the New Jersey Boogers. And then Houston goes there. CJ Stroud gets rocked. And then after Tank Dell, kind of seeing the weapons are starting to get injured. Tank Dell was hurt. I believe Nico Collins has been banged up as well here.
Too, yeah.
So now we're relying on the likes of Robert Woods, Brevin Jordan, and then it's all on Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary, Dalton Schultz there. But there's not too many real weapons at wide receiver right now. Does this loss discourage you just on their playoff chances? Maybe they're just a year away now and you kind of start to pack it up for a draft pick.
I do think that they are a year away. I thought this before the game, but I think that without Tank Dell, without Nico Collins might come back, but Tank Dell obviously out for the year. This is a team that I think is already overachieved, but especially with their losses, like maybe they can win another game or two, but they're definitely not making the playoffs, nor would I want them to at this point. So I would say, yes, I think that they should maybe pack it in. Maybe, I think what's the record now? 6-7.
Yeah.
I think that you can see like maybe another win or two in there, depending on their schedule. But moving forward, like they should be looking to the future. They should be thinking about players like T. Higgins, players like maybe they trade for a star who's unhappy.
George Pickens.
Yeah, maybe you make
Pickens.
a play for George Pickens who wants out of Pittsburgh. Like, I think you should plan for next year because you're already a year early into your rebuild.
Yeah, I think being a year early is good, especially gives those teams confidence, especially D'Amico Ryans being able to come in there, change a culture, especially with CJ Stroud. But with him getting rocked there, it's like, oof, I don't know if I like him taking those hits, especially when you have a chance to make the playoffs. But even if you do make the playoffs right now, probably not going to make too much noise, especially if you're going to be going on the road to one of these tough environments here. So Texans definitely discouraging their playoff hopes there with the loss, but one win I was encouraged with this week, and I was ecstatic to see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go into Atlanta and then win 29-25, last minute drive, ball in Baker Mayfield's hands. This is what we wanted to see from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers all season long. It's like, what's going to happen when it's a one-score game against a bad opponent, not a good opponent, just a bad opponent. The Falcons are fine and they're better at home, but they're not a good team by any stretch of the imagination. Look no further than Desmond Ridder. But we had Baker Mayfield ball in his hands at the end of the game and then finds Cade Otton in the end zone. Mike Evans having a great day as well. And then we're starting to see now with Rachaad White, he's starting to get involved a little bit where it looks like their offensive line is starting to get a little bit healthier. Their run game looked better this week than it had in weeks past. And then you're also getting Chase Edmonds involved now on those short routes where now you have two legitimate running backs out of the backfield. And that's going to help the third and short situation, especially when Godwin and Mike Evans are typically 10, 15 yards deep. Now you have some under route guys. And now Cade Otton is coming on as a star at the end of the year. And this is a team with real Super Bowl experience. We did not want to see the Saints in the playoffs. We did not want to see the Atlanta Falcons in the playoffs rolling out Heineke or Desmond Ridder here. And this is the one game where I was like, I don't care if everyone ties this week. I just want to see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers get a win in Atlanta. And they did.
Yeah, this is what I wanted. I don't really have much swing in the NFC South. I could really care less about really all four of these teams. But this week, I'm like, guys, please. The Falcons should not be 2 games ahead. They shouldn't. Because, the Saints, they're going to face the Panthers. We'll talk about that game next. But the Bucks, I'm like, please, what's a better storyline? Desmond Ridder and a Bijan Robinson that Arthur Smith doesn't utilize correctly with an average at best defense, and Kyle Pitts, who's a draft bust at this point. That team, or the Derek Carr led Saints, a Derek Carr wreck at this point. I don't want to see the Saints with Chris Olave and, Alvin Kamara, whoever. That's not fun to watch in the playoffs. But Baker Mayfield, a guy who has won a playoff game against the Steelers.
Yeah.
Mike Evans, who's been there. Chris Godwin, who's been there. Devin White, all these other guys that have been there. I'd much rather see the Bucs there. Even if they're not going to win a playoff game, they're probably going to face the Eagles or Cowboys. But I'd much rather see them there. Baker Mayfield's a lot easier to root for than Desmond Ridder. Who the fuck cares about Desmond Ridder? Who the fuck cares about Derek Carr? The Bucs, Baker Mayfield, progressive commercials. We love Baker Mayfield. He was good in college. People watched him play in Oklahoma. They love him. This Bucs seems a lot easier to root for than it seemed like the Saints. Nobody cares about Derek Carr. Derek Carr, I'm sorry, he's mid. Desmond Ridder, he's below mid. He's terrible. And for people, I don't like I said, I don't lean one way or another. But this Bucs team, everyone's 6-7 now. Do. I do.
I don't lean one way or the other, but I do.
I lean for the Bucs here because you have offensive weapons there, and you have a defense that's been comparable this whole year, and they're a gritty team. They're not the best team, but if there's a team that could come out of the NFC South and host a playoff game, I'd much rather see it in Raymond James Stadium than any of these other games here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there could be an interesting situation where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win a playoff game, and I'll go through the history of why. So Baker Mayfield, when he gets to the playoffs versus the Cleveland Browns, it was the Steelers year where the Steelers started out really hot, and then they kind of just fell off a cliff as the season went through. And then they kind of started to get a grueling schedule towards the end of the year. And it was like, really, who did the Steelers beat? Now, it's not the same situation. These are two teams in a very different spot. But say the Philadelphia Eagles fall into that wild card spot and they're so beat up, they're so tired from that Super Bowl run, and then they are just dragging their feet into the playoffs, and now they don't even have the 1 seed. They don't have the bye there. They're on the road in the wild card spot right now after going through the hardest schedule in football. They're just exhausted. Jalen Hurts is on one knee at this point, and then the coordinators on offense and defense haven't really been able to fill in for Murph from Impractical Jokers and Coach of the Year candidate Shane Steichen now on the Indianapolis Colts. And then you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are flying high right now with Baker Mayfield. They have Super Bowl experience. They've beaten this Philadelphia Eagles team before. The Philadelphia Eagles really can't run the ball. And then you have Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Devin White, Vita Vea, Antoine Winfield Jr., all of those guys still there on defense. And they're like, wait a minute, they can't run the ball. You just got to contain A.J. Brown here a little bit. Dallas Goedert is banged up. Jalen Hurts is on one leg. Is it that crazy to think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could potentially upset the Eagles if they fall into that spot?
It's not crazy because I think that's a good point there. Their schedule has been grueling and their team has not looked the same.
They look tired.
They do look tired. I mean, you think about it. The Chiefs, the Bills, the Cowboys, the Niners. These are 4 teams that are playing either for playoff positioning or they're in the mix for the Super Bowl at this point. 3 of those teams are in the Super Bowl bubble. And now at this point, you go in, you have more grueling schedules ahead. Face the Bucs. The Bucs are going to be at Raymond James Stadium. They're going to have the crowd work there, so it's not going to be easy for them. I mean, the Super Bowl hangover is a real thing. You're seeing it with the Chiefs and the Eagles at this point, although I think the Eagles have definitely played better. But they've lost the last 2 straight games. They have more games ahead that are going to be grueling for them. So I don't think it's crazy. I would still take the Eagles in that game when we go to preview it, but it's something to keep in the back of our minds, something that we can look at. We're entering week 15. Maybe, as we get closer, I think that's something we should keep in the back of our minds. This is a team. This is a sports podcast that has predicted other things in the past. We're going to put it in the back of our pocket. Yeah,
I think that's a really interesting thing to think about because the Steelers, it's not the same exact situation, but this Eagles team kind of gives me the same vibe of that Steelers team that started out 10-0, and then they slowly start to peter off. And with how Danny DeVito's been playing for the Giants, he looks way better than Daniel Jones, and they look like a much better team than the team that got annihilated by the Eagles at this point last year. So if the Eagles are kind of scraping into the playoffs at that point, I could definitely see that. Do I think they'd beat the Cowboys at this point? No, because I think matchup wise, the Cowboys definitely would have them beat, but I think it'd be interesting to see Eagles Bucks in the first round.
Yeah, I think so. And that's currently, I think, what it is at this point, because I think the Bucs have the tiebreaker currently. We'll go over it in the preview, but
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. We'll keep this in the back of our pocket and preview this as we get closer.
Yeah, and then we had the Carolina Kitty Cats take on the New Orleans Saints here. Not too much to talk about because neither of these teams are that interesting. The interesting and the part to look at about this game is that Carolina Panthers, former employees and current, are telling Ben Johnson to stay away from the franchise. They're like, David Tepper is crazy. It is dysfunctional. This is not a great organization to play for. Just look no further than what they did to Cam Newton when he left, basically scrubbing the organization clean of the best player they've had in their history with Cam Newton, Superman himself. And then they're saying, don't come here. Frank Reich fired sooner than Urban Meyer was fired. It's dysfunctional here. It is chaos. They wanted us to draft Bryce Young and then trade away DJ Moore. Nothing here makes sense. And honestly, with the Frank Reich hiring, I thought it was a bad hire, which comes down to bad ownership. And then Frank Reich during the season was talking about, yes, some owners are involved and it can really mess up the flow. And some owners take a step back. And I feel like this owner is stepping in and disrupting my flow, which is kind of subliminally what Frank Reich was trying to say. And for me, that makes a lot of sense, especially with this Carolina Panthers organization. Like before Cam Newton, they were fine. They made the Super Bowl one time versus the Patriots. And then with Cam Newton, they made the Super Bowl one time, but that was with Ted Ginn Jr. and Devin Funchess, Kelvin Benjamin, and Jonathan Stewart had a career year. It wasn't
all of them had career years.
It wasn't for all of this talent that we brought on offense.
I have a comparison for this Panthers team. And I thought going into this week, I'm like, this is a game that maybe they can win. But after this game, my emotions became very emotional. I felt bad. I feel bad for Bryce Young. And I think there's a quarterback or a situation that reminds me of it. I wasn't alive for this situation, so I did some research. The 1999 Cleveland Browns. Okay. This Panthers team has become the new Cleveland Browns. I think that as we enter in, this is what it's going to become. First things first, what was similar to the Cleveland Browns of 1999 to this 2023 Panthers?
They suck.
Well, yes. So let me speak. New owner, right? Art Modell moved him to Baltimore. They got a new owner, expansion team.
Okay.
That new owner had the first overall pick. They drafted Tim Couch over Donovan McNabb. Their coach at the time, Chris Palmer, wanted Donovan McNabb. Chris Palmer, not a very good head coach. 5-27 as a head coach. Frank Reich, the last 20 games, 4-16-1 over the last 2 years.
Okay.
One of their moves in the offseason was to sign an aging running back, not wide receiver, but sign an aging Terry Kirby, who we don't know because I wasn't born in the fucking 90s. Second in receiving yards, right? 29 years old, aging running back. Probably shouldn't have been there. His number one was Kevin Johnson. You're probably thinking, who's Kevin Johnson? Yeah, welcome to the club. Who the fuck's Kevin Johnson? Not only that team finished 2-14. Their offense was anemic. Their offensive coordinator was a disaster. The coaching was a disaster. And it started a string of terrible quarterbacks. And then I look at the Browns, right? The quarterbacks that they took afterwards, right? He was the first round pick and he did not end up panning out in the NFL. Then they had Brady Quinn. Brady Quinn, his number one receiver was Braylon Edwards, who he was fine, I guess, but not a great offensive line, had one of the worst offensive lines. Another thing about Tim Couch relating to Bryce Young. Bryce Young's been sacked 48 times this year. Tim Couch that year was sacked 70 times. Okay. And he's on pace to have that. I looked at Bryce Young's numbers. Pretty much every single game, he's getting sacked 4, 5, 6, 7 times.
That's when you could like hit the quarterback too.
Yeah. And that was a different era too.
Yeah.
But the Browns, think about it. Like Tim Couch had a lot of promise, goes into the Browns organization, which is a complete disaster, terrible owner, terrible head coach, terrible weapons, terrible offensive line. I'm not saying Bryce Young is better than CJ Stroud or he could have been better than Anthony Richardson, but I think there are certain draft busts, which is what Bryce Young will probably become, sadly, when they're put in situations that are this bad. How are you supposed to succeed with not a good offensive line, without any good weapons, without a good ownership group, dysfunction in the locker room, dysfunction in the front office? He's set up for failure, and I feel bad for the kid because I think that had he been drafted somewhere like Indy or Houston, it would have been a much different team for him, and he would have, maybe he doesn't set the world on fire like CJ Stroud, but It would look a hell of a lot better than he does now. And I feel bad for him.
Yeah, it would definitely look a lot better than he does right now. And then, so the Cleveland Browns relocated to Cleveland that year from Baltimore.
Yeah, so the old Browns moved to Baltimore.
Okay.
And then they were an expansion team in 99 with a new owner and a whole bunch of other personnel.
Yeah, because I definitely think like the dysfunction of Carolina matches that of Cleveland for sure, especially because they don't seem that patient at all with letting something develop, where you see other teams will give the head coach a long period of time, like Cowboys, Steelers, Patriots, Green Bay Packers. Like they'll let their coach ride out a little bit, let them actually develop a team. People were calling for Mike McCarthy to get fired last year. Jerry Jones kept him. And then Cowboys look really good this year. And then also you bring in Sam Darnold, you bring in Baker Mayfield. Who's the guy there?
PJ Walker.
Yeah. And then you see everyone leave Carolina and succeed, where Baker Mayfield in Cleveland was good. Kevin Stefanski was a great coordinator for him. He had a lot of good weapons. Goes to Carolina, bad offensive line, bad receivers there, exception of DJ Moore, but we know how bad Chosen Anderson was. He left there and then fell off a cliff. He had one good year with the Jets, and that was it. And then tight ends wise, it's like, okay, now that Greg Olsen is there, you have some nice guys. Like Hayden Hurst is okay. Is he going to change your world? Not really. But like defensively, this team has been really good, but it seems like one of those teams who's just going to always be dysfunctional on offense. David Tepper, as far as a owner, not a great start so far. Looks like he's a hedge fund manager is where he made his money.
Yep.
You know what that means. He's doing a little bit of the powder there to stay hyped up on the stocks. We've all watched Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, that's what he did for a living. So maybe that can contribute to some of the impulsive decisions and the dysfunction there.
Yeah. And then not only that, we talked about this, alluded to it earlier, but Ben Johnson has been told by Panthers employees, do not go to Carolina. Now, if you look back at the Browns' history from 1999 till, I would say really it ended with like 2020. When they beat the Steelers, I felt like it was the turning of a new page for the Browns. Yeah. So we'll go like 20 years out, right? And, you know, all the head coaches that they had, right? Hugh Jackson, right? They had, and there's like all these head coaches. They last a year, they get fired. They get a new head coach, they get fired. And all these quarterbacks don't really have much of a chance.
Yeah. So do you think like with the Browns and the Panthers, do you think it's necessarily on the quarterback being a bust, or do you think it's a combination of taking the wrong guy and it being dysfunctional and them not having the right support around them? Because like, as far as this situation, like I don't blame Bryce Young at all. And if someone wants to give Bryce Young another chance and see if they can fix him, like I have no problem with that, just with how bad the pieces around him are. I was never a fan of Frank Reich as a head coach, which contributes to the function there where it's kind of like, oh, the safe hire. Well, safe hires technically usually a bad hire if you're just hiring not to hire the wrong guy.
Yeah, I think that certain times, like there's different types of draft busts, right? Some of them are riddled with injury. Some of them, you know, have a terrible situation like Bryce Young has. And then some of them are like Johnny Manziel, who just had the talent, but just didn't put in the work. Jamarcus Russell, you can put those guys in there. Injuries, you know, whoever, Greg Oden, different sport, but same idea. And then there's people like him where not an offensive line, not a running game, not a wide receiver, like pretty much has to carry a franchise. And there's very few prospects that can do that right away. You're seeing that with CJ Stroud for the most part. But I think that even if he were to go elsewhere, or had he gone elsewhere, you would see him play better. But he still, I don't think, would have been like Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud. I know it's early, but he's one of those guys that I don't think he should have gone number one. Maybe they should have taken someone else. But when you have owner interference, and then he comes in, he has all the pressure in the world to turn around a franchise that's been a disaster since 2015. It's not really fair to him. And I feel for him. I wish that they could just trade him. But at this point, there's so much equity in Bryce Young that they don't really have much of a choice but to run him out there.
Yeah, especially like I think of like Jared Goff with Jeff Fisher, like how bad and dysfunctional. And then the Rams, as soon as they got to LA, they want to start making a splash here. Then you bring in Sean McVay, who ends up fixing Jared Goff, and then he ends up taking you to a Super Bowl. Or like just like if you get like an average quarterback like Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, or someone who can be a franchise guy, or Justin Herbert, like you threw him in a situation like this, or Tua, but like they can't overcome the situation here, and they can't
Yeah.
overcome bad coaching. They can't overcome not having an offensive line, not having weapons. And it looks like the Panthers are going to be breeding dysfunction for a long time. And now the Falcons are a little bit dysfunctional. They don't know what they want to do with Arthur Smith, and the Saints a little bit dysfunctional here as well.
Yeah. I think that you go back to Alex Smith. He struggled in San Francisco when they were dysfunctional. Andy Reid saved him. Trevor Lawrence, right? First year with Urban Meyer. Horrible, bunch of dysfunction, weird owner. Owner looks like he's like a evil villain in a movie.
Yeah.
Brings in Doug Peterson, fixes Trevor Lawrence. Like, you need to have a great coach, but the problem is none of the good coaches want to coach there because they have David Tepper as their owner.
Yeah.
Who's now probably the worst owner in the NFL.
One of them, yeah.
He's up there. He's in the top 5 at least. He's in the conversation. But
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I feel for Bryce Young. I want to see him get another opportunity. Will he get another opportunity?
I think so. I think he should.
He should. 100%.
Yeah. Offensive coaches will look at that situation like, okay, like you're the number 1 pick in the draft and you were there. Like you can at least sit on our bench for a few years. Maybe it's a situation like Tennessee where you have like the dumbest quarterback room in the league, and then you just want to bring in another guy there that has some potential.
Yeah. Because I think he's got a potential to have like an Alex Smith arc.
Yeah, definitely. Or like Geno Smith. He's going to be like the blueprint going forward in the future for saving someone. And then even Baker Mayfield doesn't look the best in Carolina, was setting records for being bad in Carolina. Then he goes to Tampa Bay, plays his ass off, and now he looks like a legitimate starting quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah. So there's hope for him. 100%.
Yeah, and then we have the Chicago Bears, where it looks like everyone at this point is either playing or coaching for their job. And ever since they got Montez Sweat, that Bears defense has actually been really good. I know they played the Vikings last week. I was like, okay, was it just the Vikings offense being really bad and starting to fall apart with Josh Dobbs? We lose some of that euphoria here. Or is it that Bears defense? Let's see them do it against another team. And then you do it at home versus the Detroit Lions. Kind of been into Chicago has been Jared Goff's house of horrors. I know that was the game everyone wanted to jump off ship with him. It was Bears, Rams. He had one of the worst games of his career there. And then he's always struggled against the Bears, being with the Detroit Lions. And then their defense shows up, gets some turnovers, locks him down. And then for me, Justin Fields kind of has in the back of his mind that they're probably going to take Caleb Williams because he's one of the better talents that's ever come along, and they have that number 1 pick here. So I think at this point, he's really playing for his jobs, and he's playing for that role where he can go to Atlanta, step into a situation like that with Bijan Robinson, with Drake London, and some weapons out there. And then an offensive-minded head coach who knows how to use him without overwhelming him with information that he can't necessarily compute and process all of. Just make the system easier for him, know how to use his legs there, and then actually build it into an offense where Matt Eberflus is kind of a defensive guy. So it's not really his specialty there.
Yeah, I think that, he's essentially trying out for another opportunity, which I think he's earned because you've seen flashes with Justin Fields, and there was plenty of flashes in this game where I'm like, okay, I see the appeal with Justin Fields. Get him in a place where he's got decent weapons and a good offensive-minded head coach and see what happens. You know, I think that there's definitely some potential there for him. But my big takeaway with this game is like the Lions, this is the game where I really started to kind of worry about them a little bit because it felt like the last couple of weeks they've been playing kind of loose. You've seen some turnovers from Jared Goff. You've seen some fumbles, missed opportunities. Their defense taking a step back. And while I don't think that the sky is falling necessarily, I think this is something where this is the game. You lose to the Bears. You should have beat the Bears. The Bears suck historically. You should. The Bears are a team that you should probably win.
Yeah.
For a team that is as good as the Lions with as much talent as they have. So I think that, you know, we've seen how they've rebounded from losses. We saw from the Packers game to the Saints game. How do they rebound from the Bears game? Because I think this is at the point of the season where there's a month left. There's 4 games. The number 1 seed isn't necessarily gone from their sights. They can still technically get it, although I don't think they do. But you're still playing with seeding. Right now you'd face the Vikings, and that's a team that you historically split with. So Dan Campbell's got to go in there, rev up the troops, and say, hey, if we're going to get it, we got to get it now. Yeah. We got to clean up the mistakes because the first half of the season, they were world beaters, but now it seems like they're a team that definitely is beatable.
Yeah, they definitely look like a beatable team right now. And it is something where Dan Campbell was saying after the game, they're like, what do you have to do to fix this team? And he's like, I got to be a lot more irritable, which is something I can do. So it's in practice now. It's going to be, hey, Jared, we know you're the franchise guy. We talk you up in Hard Knocks. We talk about what a great quarterback you've been. And then there have been times where you look at Jared Goff as a quarterback and you're like, wow, what a great quarterback Jared Goff is. And then you have to be like, okay, you can be our franchise guy, but you're still competing for that job. We went out there, drafted Hendon Hooker. He's a project now, but you can't keep putting the ball on the ground week in and week out. We can't keep having these glaring miscommunications. And then it also comes to holding someone like Ben Johnson accountable, where you have to have this offense buttoned up. You have all the great play calling out of the backfield. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams. You have two really good running backs. Your offense just can't look this bad. And at the same time, your defense can't be this bad either. And then it's another conversation where Dan Campbell's like, okay, we can't be allowing these massive plays to gash us. We can't be this inconsistent on defense and then expect to win games. It's like we started out hot at the beginning of the season and now we're acting like we just deserve to walk into the playoffs and get a win. It's like, that's not the way it's going to go, especially in the NFL. And it's always the worry when a young team has a lot of success early in the season. And I think it could be good for them because they have to overcome some adversity. The Bears, it's not like they're a slouch, and it is a divisional game where you can see some teams losing to a weaker team in their division. Buffalo Bills lost to the New England Patriots this year. Sure. Miami Dolphins struggled against the Patriots this year. So it's like, for us as a team, we can't be in these situations against the Chicago Bears where we're the ones who made the situation possible for them to beat us, where we're putting the ball on the ground, we're turning it over week in and week out. So in practice, it's definitely probably going to be a point of emphasis where he has to get on some guys there, because right now the Detroit Lions kind of just look like the Atlanta Falcons, where they would get to the playoffs. Matt Ryan would usually be like perennially 10-6, 11-5, and then they'd get to the divisional round and then be an easy out there. For this team, it's like, hey, we got to go out there. We haven't proven anything yet. And while this is Detroit's greatest season ever, we can't be satisfied with just making the playoffs. We have to take it to another level. And this team definitely has another level they can go to. But it comes down to, hey, Jared, it's like, do you want to be our franchise quarterback or not? Because you're acting like you don't want to be the starting quarterback anymore. It's not like there's someone we can put in who's better than you, but we'll definitely look elsewhere. The Rams looked elsewhere, and now you're putting the ball on the ground 3 straight games, and it's just inexcusable turnovers from the Detroit Lions. And it's like, this is a team I want to see be good and a team I want to see succeed, but it has to start next week. It's like, we have to get into playoff mode. We can't just think we're gonna get there because, yeah, we're the Detroit Lions. This is our best season ever. So yeah, we'll be able to just go in there, win a playoff game like it's gonna be easy. Like, no, you have to lock in.
Yeah, you have to lock in. And they were locked in to start the season, but I think that success has kind of gotten to their head a little bit, especially for a team that's won 1 playoff game since 1957.
Yeah.
Like, you haven't proven anything. That's great that you could be 11-6, 12-5, 13-4, whatever it might be. But until you've won a playoff game, you haven't done anything. Until you actually win in the NFL in the big moments, that's what matters. I do want to give credit to the Bears, though, because since you mentioned Montez Sweat, there's been a lot of players that have stepped up for him, and I'm actually excited to see the Bears moving forward because they have those 2 overall picks in the first round, right? They're going to have the first overall pick. They can get a quarterback, and they might still be able to get someone like a Marvin Harrison or a really nice edge rusher in the draft.
Yeah.
So the Bears, I've said that this is a team that they should have beaten, and I still agree with that notion. However, the Bears, right? They got Montez Sweat. They have Jacoby Brisker, who's a nice safety for him. And they have some decent amount of talent there. They obviously signed Terrell Edmonds as well from Buffalo. I think they're building something there defensively. The Bears, historically, it's been great defense and middling offense that's given them success in the past, with the old MVP, Mitch Trubisky, and that team.
The MVP?
The MVP, that's what he was. He was the Nickelodeon most valuable player. That's kind of been their bread and butter. And I think that in the next year, we could see the Bears, they trade Justin Fields for maybe like a 3rd or 4th round pick. They can get some wide receiver talent, get another number 2, because sorry, Darnell Mooney's not a number 2. Go out there. You have Cole Kmet. You have DJ Moore. get maybe another running back in there, spend some money. You have a bunch of salary cap space. This Bears team, I think maybe next year could be the year they make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think next year could be an interesting year. Now, do you think they ride with Coach Stepdad, or do you think they go out there and get Jim Harbaugh?
I think they're gonna they're already flirting with Jim Harbaugh. He's gonna be the next Bears head coach because he hasn't even been fired yet. They're like, we're gonna explore options for Matt Eberflus, but if it doesn't work out with him, we're looking at Jim Harbaugh. I'm like, okay, so that's your answer.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, there's a girl that you're with and you kind of know that it's over, but you're not quite sure. Like, well, if it doesn't work out with her, my ex, she's been texting me lately. So, I don't know. I mean, I'll look at it with her, but I don't know. It's like, yeah, well, your answer's there. You're probably going to fire Matt Eberflus.
Yeah. Do you think Jim Harbaugh would want to go to the Bears, or do you think there are going to be better options out there for him? Like, would you rather coach like Caleb Williams, where you can bring in a new team and then kind of build your own team? Or would you want to go to somewhere like LA in a division where you're more familiar, or in Oakland there where you've been on the West Coast before? Or do you think, I've been in Michigan the past few years, I'm fine just staying in the Midwest here and then hopping from Michigan to Chicago?
I think Chicago would be interesting for him because the Bears, building that tough defense. I know that he kind of built the 49ers back up because really 2000s was not a great decade for them. He comes in, he has success with Colin Kaepernick in that defense, brings them to a Super Bowl, nearly wins it. And then I think the Bears are an interesting thing for him because they already have the talent there. He saw Caleb Williams in college. He might be able to get Caleb Williams if he comes back, like bring him in there, get the right weapons there. Jim Harbaugh, I think Chicago he would prefer.
Yeah.
Because some of these other ones, like you have ownership dysfunction with the Spanos and the Davis family. So I feel like he's going to probably be the next Bears head coach.
Yeah, and I think the best thing Jim Harbaugh would be able to bring is what Pete Carroll brought to Seattle, where Pete Carroll went to Stanford for a few years. And then you're like, wow, Pete Carroll is hitting on all of these draft picks. That's crazy. And then you're like, he was recruiting all of these guys out of high school to Stanford, and then he was playing up against all of these guys. And then when you're on the field there, eye test, you see the guy really pop off the field. And that's how he was able to grab the Earl Thomases, Richard Sherman, Martellus Bennett, all these players, Bobby Wagner, all these players on defense, where Jim Harbaugh, if you sign him to the Bears and then he's like, okay, I get the number 1 pick, I get to trade Justin Fields for probably a starter. And I think you could definitely get a 2nd round pick for Justin Fields with the right team for sure. And then get some players back for him. And then the defense already has potential there where it's shown up. And then you already have the most underrated tight end in the league in Cole Kmet. And then you really go out there, draft a beast running back with Caleb Williams. And then I don't know if he still wants part of the ownership there or not, but then you're able to get him DJ Moore and a top receiver in the draft, which Jim Harbaugh will already be familiar with all of those guys, and then bring some players over from Michigan. I think that would be the most interesting part with Chicago, is he could kind of fix their draft problems that they've had.
I think it's also interesting because when Pete Carroll left USC, there was a looming allegation there too with the Reggie Bush stuff and all the other lore that was there with USC. Jim Harbaugh has the sign stealing bullshit that's going on with Michigan that a lot of people are saying is just a lot of noise. So you can leave those, not have to deal with the repercussions there. Go to the NFL, coach the Bears back up to their glory of 2018 with Khalil Mack and all the guys that were there, and bring them back to the promised land. I think that's a really attractive option for Jim Harbaugh as they move forward. Plus, like you mentioned, the college players that are going to be pouring in the next few years. That's when you can see him have some successful drafts as he moves in, because he's been in Michigan for the last 10 years, roughly 6 years. He's been there for a while now. So he knows who's good and who's not. And if the ownership group's like, I don't know, maybe we go with Drake Mays, you're like, no, Caleb Williams. We're going Caleb Williams. That's not much of a choice there. So I think that would be a good fit for him. And I think I would feel good about the Bears moving forward if it was Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, and if I was Jim Harbaugh and the Bears tried to pull something like that, I'd be like, aren't you the team that traded up for Mitchell Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson? Yeah, I think I should be the one to make that draft pick here.
You're also the only franchise that have never had a 4,000-yard passing quarterback. So maybe I know a thing or two. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, my success as a head coach, I think, speaks for itself. Brought it to a Super Bowl. Colin Kaepernick was one of the best players in the league at that time.
Patrick Willis.
Yeah, and that defense that they built, like Navarro Bowman, like they had some studs there.
Vernon Davis on offense, like that was
the ageless wonder of Vernon Davis.
Yeah, Vernon Davis was awesome. But yeah, and then there's the team that beat him in the Super Bowl, his brother John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens. And then thought the Rams, this was a game where they needed to win if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive. I still think their hopes are alive here, but definitely a huge blow. Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, and Cooper Kupp is the formula for that offense, and it's a great winning formula. It was awesome to see both of these teams ball out in the rain, and I think the main storyline here is I want to see the Baltimore Ravens do it with Mark Andrews and what that's going to look like. Can they put up points with some of these elite offenses in the NFL? And then Isaiah Likely stepped up in this game. Odell Beckham Jr. stepping up, and Zay Flowers is really starting to come into his own here. So this game gave me a lot of faith in the Baltimore Ravens offense. However, what worries me is Kyle Hamilton getting banged up in this game, and then their defense at home in the rain, giving up 31 points, which is supposed to be one of the better defenses in the NFL. Not in love with it, especially Matt Stafford, who's usually a turnover happy quarterback, and then you really weren't able to make him too uncomfortable in this game.
No, Matt Stafford had a great game, and the recipe for the Rams has been, like you mentioned, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. But you know what? My big worry about the Ravens entering the game was their offense. How are they going to be? I think Isaiah Likely is a beast. I think that he could be a starting tight end elsewhere if there wasn't a Mark Andrews there. So that was exciting. I think Zay Flowers, come next year, I think he'll be one of the more elite receivers in the league. Whether he's the number one or not, he has to prove. But I think that he's going to be really nice moving forward for him. And then, we were worried about Odell and Nelson Aguilar in the offseason, and they've played well. Nelson Aguilar got a few key first downs for him. They were able to move the ball. They got the touchdown. So Ravens offense was a concern entering this game, but they got the win. I think the Rams had some missed opportunities. I think they definitely could have won that game, but I'm excited. I think the Rams probably feel slighted after this game because I think that they definitely had some, especially in overtime, they had some opportunities to win, but Ravens proved that their offense, they can move the ball even without the loss of Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I think that was the big thing, and then proving that, especially at home in the rain, just seeing Lamar Jackson being able to open it up, especially because their offense is supposed to be a little bit more spaced out this year. They're not doing as many bigger sets with two tight ends, and then it's a lot more of Zay Flowers, Aguilar, and Odell Beckham Jr., and it's just nice to see OBJ starting to come into his own. Does it worry you, though, when you start to see Lamar Jackson relying on Nelson Aguilar, where in the playoffs that could be a situation where he hits him in the hands and then it's a crucial drop at the end of the game? Like, is that still a thought in the back of your mind, or do you think the Ravens are a lock to win a playoff game?
It depends on who they match up with.
Yeah,
because there's a couple of teams there where I'm like, this team could give them hell. Nelson, I mean, that's always going to be in the back of my mind with Nelson Aguilar. That's what he's notorious for, right?
Yeah,
but I still think that they have enough talent elsewhere outside of him, and I think their offense is dynamic enough that they can definitely still win a playoff game. I can't say it's a lock yet because I have to see who they match up with, but they should probably win that division and host a playoff game. So I think the answer would still be yes. I think they still can win a playoff game for sure.
Yeah. I think probably the toughest matchup for them, because if they get the 1 seed, and it's looking like they might get it, if they match up with a wild card in the first round, a la Cleveland. Like, I feel like that would be the worst matchup possible. Joe Flacco coming back into Baltimore, a banged up secondary with Kyle Hamilton injured. Like, imagine the storylines.
That's a storyline right there.
Wild card, like, you want to say, like, is the NFL rigged? Is it not? And then the Cleveland Browns marching into Baltimore with Joe Flacco, and then he has the best game of his career.
That'd be amazing. I'm rooting for that, honestly.
Yeah, I'm rooting for that too. Like Joe Flacco, the story of him, and then we can get to the Jaguars-Browns game if you want. But the story of Joe Flacco, where you have DTR needs CPR, who doesn't look like he knows how to throw a football. Then you have PJ Walker, XFL MVP, not NFL MVP, not even a Nickelodeon MVP.
Yeah.
And then you have Joe Flacco here, comes in, and then they're like, Joe, how do you feel about being the starting quarterback the rest of the year? He's like, I am. I didn't know that. And then so he's just coming in there. He's playing well. And the knock on Joe Flacco before was that he would hold the ball too long looking for the big play. Well, Joe Flacco now, he's 38. He has a 9-year-old and he has an 11-year-old son. So I think with him, he's at the stage of his career where he's trying not to get hit. Kevin Stefanski is a more conservative head coach, was kind of like is a perfect matchup where Joe Flacco's like, I'm going to come in here. I really don't want to take any massive hits where I'm going to get injured and then have to rehab and not play football again. So let's go out here, get the ball out quick, be efficient. And then if I have a turnover or two, that's fine because this defense is going to be able to make up for it. And then you have Elijah Moore saying, this is like poetry in motion compared to the other quarterbacks I've had, which is what he said the past few weeks about Joe Flacco being there. And it seems like with the Cleveland Browns all season, we're like, wow, if they just had a guy who could make a forward pass or throw an out route to Amari Cooper and then get the ball down the field, this team would be electric. And now the Cleveland Browns can finally go screen and bomb it down the field. And with Joe Flacco, I think the thing that benefits the Browns the most with him is that it is week 13, 14, 15 that he joined the team and started playing with them. So for a 38-year-old, you're like, yeah, he's old. Is he going to get fatigued? No, because he's there at the end of the year where we've seen Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning start out a year hot, and then it looked like they just had dead arm and they really couldn't get it past 15 yards, where Joe Flacco now is going to be like, hey, I've made a Super Bowl run before. I got here later, and then I have all of these weapons. He may have the best offense he's ever had in the NFL outside of the Jacoby Jones year with the Ravens where they won the Super Bowl. So for him, it's like, okay, let's go out there and get it done, and maybe I'll get a statue in front of the stadium in Cleveland.
If he wins them a Super Bowl, I mean, if Nick Foles can have a statue outside of Philadelphia for being the backup and winning them with the Philly special, Cleveland Browns have never made it to a Super Bowl. Mind you, they haven't made an AFC title game since I think the 80s with the fumble. So if Joe Flacco turns back the clock, and let's not forget that his run to the Super Bowl with the Ravens was one of the best runs of any quarterback of the level of Joe Flacco ever. Like 11, he had more touchdowns in that run than Joe Montana did back in that era. So, I mean, he's got the recipe for it. What wins Super Bowls? Defense. Who has the best defense in the NFL? The Browns, right?
Yeah.
If they're injuries, I mean, I know they lost some key players and some of them are banged up, but that Browns defense is no joke. Plus, with the run game, like you lose Nick Chubb, but Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt have filled in pretty well for them. Jerome Ford had a big run in this game, and then you have the weapons. Like I would say his weapons are better than what he had in Baltimore. Amari Cooper, stud wide receiver, clear number one. Elijah Moore, good receiver, and David Njoku. He loves David Njoku. David Njoku had one of his best games as a pro this last week. So
yeah,
I think if nothing else, you don't want to face him in the wild card round. Like if they team up with a team, whether it be the Dolphins or a team like hell, even the Chiefs don't want to face the Browns.
Any team. No one wants to face the Cleveland Browns because this year the Cleveland Browns know they have to win the Super Bowl. Why? You're telling me you're playing Madden franchise mode, and this seems a little ridiculous, but if you play Madden with the salary cap mode on, please tell the people how screwed the next few years the Cleveland Browns are in salary cap hell.
So when I play Madden, I like to have like a realistic mode and then one where like, you play around with no salary cap, no, whatever.
Have fun.
I did the realistic mode with the Browns because I'm like, damn, what's it going to look like with Deshaun? Like, how fucked are they? They're fucked. They're really fucked. Because Deshaun Watson's salary cap, like they're going to have to get rid of, they just signed Grant Delpit, but they're going to have to get rid of like potentially like a Denzel Ward. Nick Chubb, they're probably going to have to get rid of. Amari Cooper, definitely gone. Elijah, like this whole team, not only is their offensive line expensive, not only is their defense expensive, not only is their contract with their quarterback the worst. Usually you can restructure contracts. You can't restructure Deshaun Watson's contract because it's all guaranteed. Can't really push it down really much at all. So what I did in my Browns franchise is I traded everybody, right? I traded Deshaun Watson. I traded Amari Cooper, and I traded some of those expensive contracts. And even after that, it took me years to not have salary cap hell. And that was with all the maneuvers. And I know that Madden obviously isn't the NFL, but the Browns are screwed. This is the year. If they don't win it this year, they're not going to. They're going to be screwed. They're going to go back. And I think, they've been good at drafting, so I think they'll be fine eventually. But this is really their year. And if they don't win it, that's tough because this is probably their best opportunity. And I think with
Yeah.
Joe Flacco, like I'm on their board. I'm on the bandwagon. I'm here for it.
I'm definitely on the Joe Flacco bandwagon because like you really can't beat experience, and he looks more competent than someone like Kenny Pickett. He looks more competent than someone like Tua. I mean, my God, we watched what happened on Monday night there. And then, so I think Joe Flacco, there could be something there. Let's see if it's something where we've seen some of these backup quarterbacks like Josh Dobbs get there, have a couple good games, and then they fall off a cliff. So let's give him some more time. But I think the Browns this year, they're like, wow, this guy can actually throw. He wants to be at the facility because he's not going to uproot his family and move to Cleveland. He's basically just hanging out in a hotel room, which means he's going to be there late night with Kevin Stefanski in the film room going over it. So he's like, if I'm here, I might as well win a Super Bowl. And my sons weren't even, I don't think he even had kids yet when he won the Super Bowl in Baltimore. And if not, they were too young to remember it. So he gets a chance to really go out there and be like, yeah, this is what it's like to see dad go out there and cook versus some of the best teams in the league. So for the Browns, I think they're in a really good spot right now. We had them winning this game, but I did not expect to see Trevor Lawrence back on the field.
No,
and
me neither.
He had the high ankle sprain. He definitely looked a little bit banged up. And for me, if you're going to throw it 40, 50 times versus the Cleveland Browns, you're probably going to have 3 or 4 turnovers, which happened in this game. And that's really been the knock on Trevor Lawrence. And I just give him credit for going out there after having a really tough injury, short turnaround on Monday Night Football versus one of the best defenses in the NFL in the Cleveland Browns. And you still had a chance to go out there and win this game. And even if Trevor was healthy, I would have picked the Browns to win this game. 3 turnovers. You don't love to see it, but he did go out there playing banged up. Hopefully he gets better, and it'll probably be in Jacksonville if they face off again, because it looks like they'll probably be the 4 and the 5 seed, and it's going to be a rematch. So we'll see how the rematch goes, but credit to Trevor for sucking it up and going out there versus a monster in Myles Garrett, one of the best defenses.
And plus they were without Christian Kirk too. Christian Kirk should come back for the playoffs, but you lose a number 2, and I know he's not Calvin Ridley, but I think he's definitely a loss that you can feel, especially with being the number 2 there. But Evan Ingram stepped up. He had some big runs. Travis Etienne had some big runs in that game. And their offense, like, they moved relatively well. So I give them a lot of credit there. So, I don't love the turnovers. I think that's been my big knock on the Jags all season. It's just sloppy ball. You've seen a lot of fumbles on the offensive side, kind of losing themselves out of games at some points. But Trevor Lawrence, him being banged up and still playing, like, he had 3 interceptions, but he still had 3 touchdowns as well. I think he threw for 300 yards. So as much as I don't love, I think he probably could have benefited from having another week off, but ultimately still went out there and proved that he's a tough competitor. Yeah,
especially this game. I thought they were going to lose it anyway, so you might as well bench Trevor and then let him really heal there, and then have CJ Beathard kind of be that sacrificial lamb to the Cleveland Browns defense there. But credit for Trevor for sticking it out in that game. One player we didn't know was going to be injured, but showed up on the injury report later last week was Geno Smith. Geno Smith was ruled out, and then Drew Lock didn't look the worst in the first half, and then he started falling back into some of those Drew Lock isms. Then San Francisco 49ers cover the spread, end up winning 28-16 at home, and then Trey Greenlaw, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, like, everyone on that defense was able to cook in this game. And then Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, still one of the best duos in the league at running back and wide receiver. George Kittle making plays. Like, really, we expected the San Francisco 49ers to go out there and dominate. And then that's what they did. And they're putting themselves in the position to be the number 1 seed in the NFC after beating the Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles here.
Yeah, credit to them that they know how to win. And Deebo Samuel had a great game in this game. And, beginning of the first half, it seemed like it was going to be a lot more competitive. I feel like if Geno played, this game would have been a little bit closer, but ultimately I think there was the right outcome. I feel bad for the Seahawks because I do think that they're a good team, but this 49ers team, like, there's a reason why they're the number 1 seed now.
Yeah.
Their team is loaded on every front, and this is really their year. So not a whole lot to say about this game. Brock Purdy still had a good game. His MVP conversation still alive and well, but great team all around.
Yeah, so the thing with this game is it's interesting because if the San Francisco 49ers get the 1 seed and say the Cowboys are the only wild card team to win, that would pit them up against the Dallas Cowboys in the second round. And then the Philadelphia Eagles, if they still end up winning their division, and they do have the tiebreaker with the Cowboys because it comes down to conference record because their divisional record is the same. And then the Philadelphia Eagles have the Giants left. So if they take care of the Giants, end up winning out from here, they still control their destiny to win the division. And then the Cowboys have a tough game there. So if you're the Eagles, you can kind of pass off the Cowboys to the 49ers in the second round. And then potentially you get to match up with the Detroit Lions team in the second round. That's kind of been reeling as well. But that's also a beneficial matchup for the Detroit Lions. So like playoff wise, they're going to get the 1 seed. But do you really want the 1 seed if your gift is having to face the Dallas Cowboys in the second round?
No, I think I would rather have the Niners get the 1 seed. And then, the 2 seed, I honestly think it'd be beneficial for the Cowboys to win at this point for them because you face the Bucks. Granted, it's away, but they're a team that the Eagles should beat, right?
Yeah.
So they face them. And then at that point, like, I think as long as they can avoid the 49ers until the conference title game,
yeah,
then that's what I would try to shoot for if I'm the Eagles because you are playing for the Super Bowl. You're trying to avoid if you can face the Bucks and then eventually the
so you'd have to be the 2 seed because you have the tiebreaker with the Cowboys because it comes down to in-conference record. So that Cowboys loss to the Cardinals is really going to hurt them because that's the difference between them being the wild card and winning the division if there's a tiebreaker.
Oh, okay. So if they're the 2 seed, they would face the 7th seed. So they would face like kind of unclear yet who that is, but
maybe the Rams.
Let's say it's the Rams, right? I think they take care of the Rams. And then they face the Lions, who have been reeling. And then they'd face either the Cowboys or the 49ers.
Yeah.
49ers. Historically beat the Cowboys, so we'll say it's the 49ers.
Yeah, and then we had the Minnesota Vikings going to Las Vegas, and this was a real test for both teams because we want to see, are the Vikings going to be a legit team that can actually go out there and potentially steal a playoff game in the NFC here? And then you have Pierce, who's coaching for his job next year with the Las Vegas Raiders here, and then it's 3-0. Mark Sanchez had the privilege of calling this game, and he's like, yep, it was a defensive battle, but I had to find as many positives in this game as possible. And then honestly, like, I get Justin Jefferson got hurt in this game, and I get the Minnesota Vikings defense has been really good over the past few weeks, but neither team scored. Like, this game was honestly bizarre. We have Jordan Addison and Alexander Mattson, no matter what you think of him, still pretty good. Then you have TJ Hawkinson on this team come back. Josh Dobbs ends up getting benched in this game. And then on the other side, we still have Josh Jacobs, Hunter Renfrow, Devontae Adams. Ever heard of him? He's a pretty good wide receiver. And then Jacoby Myers, who's been balling out for them. And then you have Max Crosby, who's really good on defense there, but like neither of these defenses do I ever think of, yeah, they would definitely shut out a team that has some pretty good offensive weapons. And then last year, Josh Jacobs was the best running back in the league. And then I get like the Vikings, basically their entire offensive line got hurt there. But where is the excuse for the Raiders to score 0 points? I mean, you're coaching for your job here, right? And you want to be there next season. Like, give them some, like, I guess you shut them out, but like give them some reason to keep you.
Yeah, this is a game. This is what I was expecting for the Pats and Steelers game, honestly, because of how anemic both of those offenses have been and how good those defenses have been. But the Vikings and Raiders, right? The Vikings, you know, they have Danielle Hunter and they got Harrison Smith. They got some talent there. Raiders, they got Max Crosby, but neither of these teams are world beater defenses. Vikings have played well, but 3-0. This game was grueling, and this was a 4:00 game where Scott Hansen falls asleep at the wheel on red zone, and it was just a lot of punts. And you know what? one of the earliest comments of the year was talking about the Raiders and how they had some hope because of how good their punter was. Well, we were able to see the punter in this game a lot. And you're right. He was able to pin them back into their zone quite often. And he's a damn good punter. Keenan Cole, make sure that man's a Pro Bowler. But this is, you know what? Every year there's a couple of games that are just heinous. I always go back to the 49ers and Broncos game last year, the 11-10 monstrosity. That was that game. In this season, it's like Jets and Giants game. That game was anemic. But
Bears Cowboys.
Yeah, but Vikings Raiders, this might be the worst game of the year.
This might be the worst game of all time. Like, the only thing worse would be if it was a 0-0 tie.
It was close.
Yeah, it comes down to Greg Joseph, but also with the Raiders, like, the Vikings did not have an offensive line. Justin Jefferson got hurt again in this game. Like, I get the Vikings defense is good, but you can't score any points. Like, is that an indictment on Aiden O'Connell? Is it an indictment on the coaching here? Is it an indictment on Josh Jacobs not showing up to training camp because they wouldn't pay him? Is it an indictment on Devontae Adams? Is it an indictment on Jacoby Myers? Like, who takes the blame for not scoring any points here? Because if I'm Max Crosby, I'm Bob Spillane on that defense. I'm like, hey, I held them to 3 points and you guys gave us nothing here. Like, that has to be pretty discouraging as a defender.
Well, it's the lowest scoring game in 20 years.
Yeah.
3-0. This is the first team a team's lost by scoring 3 points or less since the 90s. It's like, this is ridiculous. Like, I think the Raiders defense, like, I think next week we see this creep into them. Like, well, even if we hold them to a field goal, it's not going to be enough. 0-0 all the way up until this 2-minute warning. Like,
yeah.
That is inexcusable. And I do think part of it is coaching. Whether it is Antonio Pierce's fault or it's the offensive coordinator. I think after this game, offensive coordinator, get him out of here. You have all the talent. I don't know what happened to Josh Jacobs this year. He was a part of my fantasy team, the just terrible team that it was this year. I don't know what changed. Last year, he averaged 5 yards a carry. This year, he's averaging 3. And it's not like a lot of pieces moved. I mean, I know they have a new quarterback, but like their offensive line's fairly the same for the most part.
Yeah.
And then Devontae Adams, like, still a great receiver as well. Like, I don't know how you have a team that loaded and still suck so bad on the offensive side of the ball. I do think it comes down to coaching, and I think a lot of these guys are going to leave next year because of it. Devontae's probably going to ask to be traded. Josh Jacobs is probably going to leave and sign somewhere else, as long as they don't tag him again.
Yeah.
But I think if I'm the Raiders, like, especially the defensive side, they should feel demoralized because that's just a tragedy.
Yeah, they should feel demoralized. And the worst part about this game is that the Vikings are in contention for the playoffs, and the other 3 teams that are there competing with them all lost this week. You know who didn't lose this week? The Minnesota Vikings. So it's going to be that much more of a barn burner for that last playoff race. And if the Vikings make the playoffs this year, I don't like the NFL, like, oh, we want these teams in the playoffs. Like, teams we don't want in the playoffs, the Minnesota Vikings. They're at one point where they had no active offensive linemen on the side. And if anyone else got hurt, they're like, hey, TJ Hawkinson, I know you're like a receiving tight end. I know you're a pretty good blocker, but do you want to play offensive line for us? Because we're screwed right now. All of our offensive linemen are in the hospital right now. We may have to ask a Bear if he wants to be offensive lineman here because everyone else is gone. And the Minnesota Vikings win this week 3-0. Packers lose. Great. Rams lose. Oh, God. And then the Seahawks lose. And like, okay, there goes everyone else competing for a wild card spot here. And honestly, that's the worst part about this game. If all those other teams won, okay, this isn't that bad. But now they're 2 games up on all of those teams. It's an absolute tragedy here, but 0 points for both teams. This is embarrassing. It should be investigated by the NFL, especially in Las Vegas. Like, there's so many other things to do in Las Vegas than sit a 3-0. Like, are we in London? Like, was this game in Paris? Did they decide to do this game in Japan? Is this the Shanghai Vikings versus the Minghao Raiders? Like, what is this? Are we playing soccer? Like, this should not be the same as a Golden Knights score in Las Vegas. Like, you expect to go to a Golden Knights game and it to be 3-0, but
this was a great Twins and Athletics game, if I do say so myself. I was missing baseball a lot, especially we've been a few months away from baseball. Shohei Ohtani just signed a bag, but This Twins Athletics game, even for a baseball game, this game sucked. Just came down to a Carlos Correa 3-run home run to win the game. But good God, terrible game.
Yeah, no, this was like watching Dylan Dennis and Logan Paul. Like truly one of the worst games I've ever seen here. I'm done talking about it. Most frustrating part is the Vikings win and they're still in a good playoff spot, but hopefully they start to lose some games here coming up. But then we had the Denver Broncos, and we just got news that Justin Herbert is officially out for the year. It's unfortunate. Another franchise guy now in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence went down. He's back now, but Joe Burrow out. Aaron Rodgers out, and then Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen dealing with some nagging injuries here. Definitely not what we want to see here, especially Justin Herbert. They still kind of had a chance to push for the playoffs, but is there any part of you that's almost relieved for Chargers fans?
Yeah, because now they can expect to, I mean, they were already going to lose the last 4 games, but now they can expect it. And then if they do win a game with Easton Stick or Max Duggan, then it's like, oh, cool. That's a little bit of optimism. But now Chargers fans can have a little bit of, look to the future mentality, right? They're going to fire Brandon Staley. They're going to probably, move some old pieces around and try to get a little bit younger. This should honestly be a relief for them. They lost to the Broncos and a very, their offense scored 7 points, and I get Herbert got hurt, but this offense was the same team that won a game last week scoring 6 points. You want to talk about the 3-0 Raiders and Vikings game? How about the 6-0 Pats and Patriots game? That was awful as well. This should be a sigh of relief for them. And I know that Herbert getting hurt is not good, and that's never, I don't want Herbert to be hurt.
Yeah.
But at least now, okay, we're not going to win another game. Now we can just watch Easton Stick and hopefully think that he's something and somebody can trade for him later.
And do you fear that this gives Brandon Staley a case to the front office to stay as the head coach? Like, hey, well, Justin Herbert went down. We could have made a push to the playoffs. Mike Williams was out here. He's our best player on offense. You guys, I didn't want to sign JC Jackson. Why'd we sign him to all this money? He was a bust back in New England now.
No, I mean, that would be a Chargers thing to do, but I think there's plenty of a case at this point. He shouldn't have came back this year as it is.
Yeah.
I have text I'm going to save for our worst top 5 teams for a distraught Chargers fan. But good God, no. If they keep Brandon Staley, I feel bad for the city of Los Angeles.
For the whole city of Los Angeles. Yeah, I mean, LA as a city seems like they're doing pretty well. They just won the in-season tournament. Just got Shohei Ohtani
NBA
there.
Cup.
Yeah, the NBA Cup there, and then they have the still have the Kings. Are the Kings still good? Who knows? Who watches hockey? Not I do. But yeah, I think with the Chargers there, Easton Stick, we're now going to have the privilege of seeing him on Thursday Night Football, and he didn't look that impressive. Kind of looked like Tyson Badgett-esque when he came in there. But Denver Broncos get another win there, and now they are 1 game behind the Kansas City Chiefs of potentially overtaking that division. How do you like the Broncos' chances moving forward from here? Not making a wild card spot, but potentially making being the division winner in the West.
If they win their division, then Sean Payton should win the Coach of the Year because they started 1-5. They were perennial appearances on the worst top 5. They looked terrible. Russell Wilson's contract looked disgraceful. Now, at this point, they've won a bunch of games. Now they're 7-5, and they've played good football. Their defense has stepped up from a team that was lost 70-30 this back in September. Now they have a chance to overthrow the Chiefs. I think that's a sentiment to the coaching with Sean Payton.
Yeah. And
how good their defense has played, how good their offense has been for the most part, but also the Chiefs and how they've been, because that Chiefs and Bills game, that offense, it just can't move the ball like it once did. And it's unfortunate. You got an old Travis Kelce. You have a bunch of receivers who are just not good. Kadarius Toney should be banned from the city of Cleveland, Kansas City. It's not pretty.
Yeah, Kansas City, ugly game versus the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo starts out 14-0, kind of looks like they're going to run away with it, and then Buffalo starts doing Buffalo things, and then the Kansas City Chiefs inevitably get back into the game. No Isaiah Pacheco in this game, and then you're relying on Jerick McKinnon and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire in this game as well, and then their defenses start to sustain some injuries here, but all of the controversy was on that last call, and everyone's talking about how it robbed us of Travis Kelce and his Hall of Fame play, but it robbed us of another epic collapse by the Buffalo Bills. If anyone would have been picturing themselves as the terrorists on 9/11, it would have been the Kansas City Chiefs upsetting the Buffalo Bills again, and another epic collapse by the Buffalo Bills. And then before we get into the game, we had the bizarre, insane, crazy story of Sean McDermott saying, like, yeah, guys, we need to be like the terrorists on 9/11. And you're just like, what do you mean by
They
the
had a great
terrorists
game plan.
on 9/11? It's like they had a great game plan. They hijacked the plane. They're on the phone with George Bush coordinating everything. Not actually, I don't believe that. Everything. And then Sean McDermott, even after he got called out for the controversy, was like, oh, well, it's okay. I have a friend who died on 9/11. I was like,
That makes it worse.
That makes it worse.
That makes it so much worse. And then you think about the fact that they played on 9/11 this year. It's like they should be banned from ever playing on September 11th ever again. Imagine whether you're a rookie or you're a veteran that signs there, maybe you're Von Miller, whoever it is, and your first press conference, right? Or your first in-game speech with Sean McDermott. He's like, guys, we need to get into a terrorist mentality and be like the terrorists on 9/11. I'm like, if I'm a rookie, I'm like, I wish I got cut.
Yeah.
And if I was, like someone like a Von Miller or whoever they signed then, Cole Beasley, probably at that time, it was 2019, I'd be like, can I leave? Can they trade me now?
Yeah.
Like, this is a like, I hear that speech and I go to the ownership. I'm like, this guy should not be a head coach in the NFL.
No.
This guy shouldn't be a head coach in college. This guy should not be coaching a high school football team.
Yeah.
Get this guy out of here. What the hell was that story?
Yeah. What was it?
How do you confidently say that? Like, guys, we got to be like one of the biggest tragedies of American history.
We got to be like the Japanese on Pearl Harbor.
I'm like, what? God, what are we doing? We got to be more like the Boston Bombers. Like, guys, please,
no, we do not.
Please, no, please stop talking,
Yeah, it's like we gotta organize. We gotta put ourselves in the mentality of the people who organized one of the biggest tragedies in NFL history, and they almost collapsed that same way in Kansas City versus the Chiefs there. But Sean McDermott, rightfully so, questioned after that, and that is honestly a fireable offense, especially for a guy that struggled the past few years. Ever since that 13-second, your defense is specialty, and then you give up a play in 13 seconds versus the Kansas City Chiefs and then lose in overtime when you can't stop them. You get annihilated, and then you seem like you keep getting worse year in and year out. And then it seems like the knives have already been out for Sean McDermott recently, where they're like, let's bring in a Ben Johnson and a guy who actually knows how to run an offense here, as opposed to Sean McDermott, who's a defensive guy. So that was kind of the last straw for me, where I was early on Sean McDermott kind of being a so-so head coach before everyone else. But after this moment, I was like, wow, this epitomizes just how out of touch this guy is. If he's going to be like, oh, we should be like the terrorists on 9/11. We should be like the shark from Jaws. It's like, what are we talking about here? But then we have the game, and they almost melt down again because of Sean McDermott, where Kansas City Chiefs march down the field, and then Josh Allen throws an interception, keeps the Chiefs in the game. I picked the Chiefs to win this game, even though all the signs pointed towards Buffalo winning this game. Buffalo had more to play for in this game. Does this give you any confidence in the Bills going forward?
Sure, I guess. I don't know. I don't believe in their head coach. I don't believe in their defense. Josh Allen has thrown an interception in 9 straight games now.
Okay.
But
consistent.
Yeah, Mr. Consistent, I guess. I guess the only thing that gives me hope for them, and I guess this is probably maybe bad logic, is that the NFL wants the Bills in the playoffs.
Right.
Right? Like there's 5, I think there's 6, 7, and 6 teams right now. And like they want to have a Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes playoff. They build the whole Brady and Manning, whatever. I think they want them in the playoffs, so I feel like they're going to put them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Now, with the call that overturned the call, with the offsides with Kadarius Toney, Patrick Mahomes throwing a nightmare, like I think it was the right call, but I also think that who does that benefit the most? The Bills at the end of the day. So I think they're going to want the Bills in the playoffs. And that's why I would say yes to that question.
Yeah. And do you think there's any fairness to Patrick Mahomes being like visibly upset? Like, and Andy Reid has never had this called against him in his career. This is the first time offensive offsides has ever been called on Andy Reid, and it is the third receiver inside, Kadarius Toney, who is called for it. And is that a question of, hey, he shouldn't have been offsides here, why did you call that and interrupt one of the greatest plays? Or is it he was offsides, but also why is your receiving core so bad that you have Kadarius Toney on your team where you're able to have him on the field and allow him to make that error?
Well, he also lined up offsides 4 times in that game.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think they have a right to be upset, sure. But also, you're the Kansas City Chiefs, and you get every call. You get every single call go your way. So it's kind of ironic to see them complain about a call that doesn't go their way because it makes them look like babies at this point.
Yeah.
Like, sure, if you're like emotions are high, like initial reaction, sure, you're upset about it, sure, whatever. But like to go on the press conference and talk about it and then going up to Josh Allen saying that's the worst call ever. Like Josh Allen must have been like, dude, give me a break. Please.
You of all people.
You like I had one of the greatest playoff games of all time against you. My defense let me down. And then the fucking coin flip decided the game. Like, please shut the fuck up. If I was Josh Allen, I'd be like, okay, buddy, sure. So Josh Allen, like, I don't think he must have been like, all right, buddy, whatever.
Yeah.
But Patrick Mahomes, every call goes your way. The Chiefs, the refs love you. And now a play doesn't go your way and you guys squeal like a bunch of pigs. Give me a break, please. Yeah. Perspective is important in this. And the Chiefs, every call goes your way. This doesn't go your way this time. Get over it. Move on to the next game and maybe score more than 17 points. And this isn't a problem.
Yeah, I think score more points. And I think at the end of the day, I'm not someone who's going to blame the refs, and it is you have to play well enough where you don't put yourself in a position where the refs can determine the game, and then putting yourself in that position. Well, how do you get there? Well, you get there by relying on Sky Moore, relying on Kadarius Toney, who is an obvious bust in New York, and you thought you could fix him there. And now this offense seems like a little bit unfocused, a little bit undisciplined, and Eric Bieniemy was the bad cop in Kansas City. And now the offense is a little bit unbuttoned. Travis Kelce does look a year older, and it's not as dynamic, even though it's pretty much the same wide receiving core that they had last year, but this team just doesn't look as dynamic. I get Pacheco didn't play in this game. They probably would have won if Pacheco played. And I don't think the Chiefs are done, especially in a year like this where there's been a lot of, we don't really know who the number one contender in the AFC is. So I'm never going to bet against Patrick Mahomes. But if any year is the Chiefs off year, it definitely feels like this year, and they definitely don't feel that focused, and they don't feel like they're on a mission focused on repeating the Super Bowl. Like, hey, we've never had a repeat Super Bowl victory in this franchise, and Patrick Mahomes hasn't done that. And if you're chasing Tom Brady, you want to be focused in, year out. And then for the fury Patrick Mahomes was giving the refs, like, I don't think people should really be jumping on Mahomes. Like, I think I've seen Brady lose it plenty of times where I've seen Tom Brady chase the ref down the tunnel into the locker room. I've seen Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan ready to fight refs. Like, I don't think Mahomes freaking out after a bad call is really a big deal. And I think it's fine for Mahomes to be visibly upset. But please take that same energy and put it on Kadarius Toney in practice. Yeah. Put it on Sky Moore in practice. Like, guys, I am chasing the GOAT. I need your help.
Yeah. No, it's funny because we were talking about the Browns with Joe Flacco and like him getting a statue outside of the stadium. Well, it could not be a completely different reality for Kadarius Toney in Kansas City.
Yeah.
They should be getting pitchforks out and going to his house and saying, get some fucking stickum on your hand. Get some glue on your hands. Super glue your hands. Get some Gorilla Glue on your hands so you can catch a fucking ball. First, there was the pick 6 against the Lions in week 1. And that's when you should have known. Kadarius Toney is about to destroy the Chiefs season. And then you have this game where he lines off offsides. And there are plenty more examples of him dropping balls, lining up offsides, or just not having the wherewithal of what he's doing.
Yeah.
probably the biggest mistake they've had so far in their front. Sky Moore, he didn't pan out. He's a draft pick, whatever. Happens all the time. But Kadarius Toney single-handedly have lost him 2 games this year. And
3.
I bet there's more.
3.
What was the other one?
So he had the drop versus the Detroit Lions. There was another drop. I forget which game it was, but there's another game where it went right through his hands that they lost. I believe it was versus Philadelphia, where Patrick Mahomes put it on a line for him. He drops it there. And then this game, he's offsides. Like,
that's 3 games. They've lost how many games? 4.
Yeah.
That's 3 of the 4 games that they could have had because of Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney. This I would not go into the city of Kansas City unless if you're going directly to Arrowhead Stadium and playing the game, because otherwise, whether it's the Chiefs super fan, the Wolf man, I forget his name at the top of my head, they're gonna murder you, man. You're dead. You can never step foot in Kansas City again, or they're gonna carry you out by your head.
Yeah.
And wring your neck out. They hate you there. Even
it's like Booster and Jingle All the Way, where they just take him off the float and start stomping him out.
Yeah, like you can't you can't be there anymore. They're gonna cut him so fast. As soon as the season's over, boom, Kadarius Toney's cut. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Get him out of here. He can go play in the XFL. I'm sure he'll do great there.
Yeah, but like Kansas City, oof, you got a lot to work on. I think the Jags will definitely be the 4 seed, but if you're going to be matching up with like Cincinnati in the first round, I think that game will be the most telling is how's Jake Browning going to do versus this Kansas City Chiefs team. But I think they're probably going to lose that game and then win out the rest of the year. But this offense does not look that impressive. And the one bounce back game they had was versus the Raiders, but this is now 2 losses in a row where their offense was just anemic here.
Yeah.
But we'll see. But then we had the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Philadelphia Eagles here. Sunday night football. Cowboys really showed up and showed out, and then they're trying to prove that they are the dominant team within the division. Had a tough loss versus Philadelphia here. Do you think this was just the Cowboys playing the Philadelphia Eagles at the right time at home, or do you think they're starting to eclipse the Philadelphia Eagles where you can look on defense and be like, okay, this looks like a much more complete roster than Philadelphia at this point. And then the coordinators, the head coach, and the quarterback look a little bit more on the same page than Philadelphia, who have a new defensive coordinator and a new offensive coordinator.
I think it's maybe elements of both. I think the Cowboys are getting hot at the right time. You've seen them play a lot of, lesser teams. I think we looked at it last week. They had 7 of their 9 wins against bottom 5 teams in the NFL. But now they're proving that they can beat the best teams in the NFL. They had this game against the Eagles, and this is a great game. There's not much I can take away from the Cowboys and say discredit them in any way. Tony Pollard had a good run in this game. CeeDee Lamb has been a top 5 wide receiver this year. He's gone on an absolute tear. Give credit to CeeDee Lamb. He's somebody that entering the season, I always thought he was a really good wide receiver, but I didn't think he was in the same class as like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, some of the studs there. But I think he's earned it this year to being in the top 5, at least for this year. I think it's a little bit of both because I do think the Eagles have had a gruesome stretch with the Chiefs, with the Bills, with the 49ers, and now the Cowboys, whether they win or not, they're a physical team. Micah Parsons always giving trouble. Plus their corners, when Deron Bland isn't getting cooked, he does play physical football. And Stephon Gilmore shut down AJ Brown in this game. The ageless wonder that is Stephon Gilmore. So the Cowboys just played a better game for the Eagles. So that's what it comes down to. I think that the Eagles are tired, and I think the Cowboys are getting hot at the right time.
Yeah. Do you think the Cowboys are more desperate this year than they have been in years past, where it seems like the Cowboys are focusing on a mission? Seems like Mike McCarthy is in his bag, where he comes from having appendicitis from surgery right back into the playroom. And then we do have the national phenom of, here we go. And Dak Prescott now starting to start his signature basically play call. It's his Omaha. It's his Green 19. Now it's here we go for the Dallas Cowboys. Do you think that's what's getting them revved up here?
No, that was insane. Mike Tirico saying like, oh, this is like the new Omaha. Everyone's talking about it. This is the first time I've ever heard about it. Like I've heard him say, here we go. And I'm like, oh, cool. There we go. Yeah. That's okay. What's coming next? But like Omaha is literally the production company of Peyton Manning. It's trademarked. Like little bit different than here we go, but I digress. No, I mean, I think the Cowboys, the last 25 years, it's been a lot of playoff chokes. It's been a lot of 8-8 seasons. It's been a lot of average quarterback play with Tony Romo. And now like Dak Prescott, he's playing this is probably Dak Prescott's best season as a pro at this point. I do think I wasn't in love with the Brian Schottenheimer OC hire initially, but I think it works a lot better with someone like Dak Prescott than it does with someone like Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
I don't think Russell Wilson's issue in the past was always interceptions, but Dak Prescott definitely has. Brian Schottenheimer being a little bit more of a conservative offensive play caller definitely fits better to Dak Prescott's skill set than his. So I give a lot of credit there to him. But yeah, I think they're much more on a mission. I think they're looking for the Super Bowl, but also like just being in the NFC title game would be a win for them as well.
Yeah, I think they just need to get past the divisional round at this point. And I think for the Dallas Cowboys, they've had some pretty big upgrades at certain positions this year, mainly tight end. I feel like Dalton Schultz was a guy who lost a game for them versus the San Francisco 49ers, where he didn't have the wherewithal to get his feet in bounds there. And then versus the 49ers, you could see a tight end like making a difference in a game like that. And then also bringing in Stephon Gilmore, where you're kind of hiding him throughout the year and he wasn't really playing like himself. He's an older player. Took him a little bit of time to get into a rhythm, but what he did versus AJ Brown was he's letting him catch it, but as soon as AJ Brown or Devontae Smith caught the ball, they were getting them on the ground. And if you're going to go up against the San Francisco 49ers team, you're probably still going to play them in San Francisco. However, if the Dallas Cowboys defense can focus on, it's not a big deal if they get those catches. It's not a big deal if they get yardage on us, but they're not going to score in the red zone, and we're going to be able to tackle them and not let them get out in space. I think that would be the number one thing that would help turn around this Dallas Cowboys team. And I think Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy, their rapport has grown a little bit, where I feel like Dak was kind of skeptical about the offense. And it seems like this West Coast offense, Chris Collinsworth talked about it, Dak is starting to really get in a groove with it. I'm not the biggest Dak Prescott fan, and I think he's on the level of someone like Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, that type of quarterback here. But I think those guys still were able to go out there, win an MVP 1 year. And it was kind of the year Matt Ryan won MVP. They're like, oh, who are we going to give it to? Matt Ryan played nice with Atlanta. He had a career year. Maybe we give it to him. So if he can go through this stretch versus Miami, versus Buffalo, and then win out versus those teams, I think the Cowboys are going to be in a really good spot. And I just think defensively and offensively, this is a year where you're kind of in a similar situation with the Cleveland Browns, where once you start having to pay Micah, once you have to really roll out the Brinks trucks for someone like CeeDee Lamb, I think that's when you're going to start to see the Cowboys team get a little worse. So I think you are still in a window right now where you have to win it. I just don't think they're on the level of the 49ers yet, but I think if they met Philadelphia again and it was in Dallas, I think they would make the conference championship. Whereas if they played them in Philly, I think it's just going to be depending on the matchup and if they're at home and if they're away, because the stats with them at home, they play a lot better on turf and they're a lot faster. And I think that's helped CeeDee Lamb a lot. And I think Tony Pollard has stepped up at times where I wasn't the biggest fan of him before, but he's been able to come into his own, make some big plays when it matters.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this is the best Cowboys team I've actually seen in my time. Like, their defense has been dominant, especially against some of the lower teams. Dak Prescott's not turning the ball over, which I definitely think hurt them last year. I think the receiver core, Brandon Cooks, I mean, pretty much everywhere he's gone, he's been effective. And it took him a little bit of time to get going, but now he's a solid number 2. He's a guy that you can't really pay him wide receiver 1 money, but you can definitely fill him in as a wide receiver 2, especially to complement CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
And then Jake Ferguson. I feel like every time we talk about the Cowboys, the Packers, the Lions, like the tight ends that came out of this draft, really solid 5-6 tight ends that were taken out and have stepped up right away. And Jake Ferguson's one of those guys. He made some great plays in this game. And to move from Dalton Schultz to Jake Ferguson, hell of a lot more athletic too. Much better of a pass catching tight end. So good for the Cowboys. I think this is their year if they were to be world beaters. Like this is the year that they have to make the NFC title game or it's going to be a bust.
Yeah, especially if you like mess around in the first round, lose to a team like Tampa or lose to a team like Detroit. I feel like this year, unless you meet the San Francisco 49ers again in the divisional round, which if you're in the wild card, you probably will, then you're probably not making the conference championship. But for me, that's your only excuse to not make it is facing the San Francisco 49ers. Because at this point, they do look better than the Philadelphia Eagles. And then as a team, they just seem a lot more focused and cohesive.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we had the Packers and the Giants, and it's always sunny in East Rutherford, New Jersey when Danny DeVito is in town. And Tommy DeVito now on a absolute tear. And when they had these two Monday Night Football games, I was like, I don't know, Packers, Giants, Titans, Dolphins, we'll see. And then end up being two really good games. And the Packers end up missing a field goal, which ends up costing them the game. But the Giants defense over the past few weeks has been playing well. And what a difference not having Daniel Jones playing makes for the New York Giants or East Rutherford, New Jersey Giants.
Absolutely. No, I remember when we were talking about the team earlier in the season, I'm like, God damn, these receivers are not good. They can't do anything. Nobody can pass it down the field. Daniel Jones is not the guy. Well, in 6 games with Daniel Jones, they were 1-5, and he had 3 offensive touchdowns. In 4 games with Thomas DeVito, I will say him by his name, they have 7 touchdowns, and they're winning games. They've won 3 straight games, and I think it's time I give the Giants some respect. I gave him a lot of grief when he first came in. I'm like, undrafted rookie. You heard the noise about him getting mamas cooking and all this stuff, but I think for the Giants, like you're paying Daniel Jones $160 million, which you should have never done. But he's stepped in. He's shown like Wan'Dale Robinson actually is pretty solid.
Yeah.
Jalen Hyatt, he is a deep threat. When Darren Waller comes back, he'll be fine. Saquon Barkley, like he can run a lot better when it's not Daniel Jones. Tommy DeVito can move a little bit. He can be playing. He's a good game manager. And he's from New Jersey. He played in New Jersey. He's played in New York. Like, this, like, I like the Giants a lot more when it's Tommy DeVito than when it's Daniel Jones, because Tommy DeVito, maybe he's not like a superstar quarterback, but can he be the starter for the Giants and can they play some upset ball like they did in this game against the Packers?
Yeah,
sure. And I'm into it. I'm into the Italian, you know, I saw his agent looks exactly like what you would expect him to be.
Yeah.
His dad is just up there doing this the whole time.
The
like,
whole game.
I'm like, this is New Jersey. And like, if you've been to New Jersey, you see a bunch of Tommy DeVitos everywhere. And he fits the culture. I'm like, you know what? I'm here for it. So what they should do, move on from Daniel Jones, keep Danny DeVito, pay him $400,000 a year, and get yourself a solid wide receiver that you can match up with. And maybe then the Giants will be good, because on the other side of the ball, Kayvon Thibodeau has 12 sacks. You have Bobby Okereke in the game, and he's a solid linebacker for them. They have talent on the defensive side. They give the Packers some hell in this game. So if it's going to be run out with Tommy DeVito, I like this Giants team. And I historically don't like the Giants.
Yeah, I would like this team a lot better because it has to, I feel like your quarterback has to fit the rhythm and feel of the organization and just like the location of where it's at. Tom Brady was a good fit in New England, kind of that grind set culture. It's cold here, but I'm going to stay inside and grind all day. Joe Burrow is from Ohio. He's an Ohio fuck. He knows the culture. He's from there. And then Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, it just makes sense. So when your quarterback fits the culture of the organization, and then also you have Brian Daboll there, who was throwing tablets everywhere. He was trying to pull out hair he didn't have. It looks like he was so stressed out he wasn't going to have a beard anymore. That's how bad Daniel Jones was with the New York Giants. Like, you start 1-5 with this guy. You just paid him. You had to wait 4 years for him to show you anything. And then you're like, oh, Chris Collinsworth before the years, like Pro Football Focus, they have a lot more speed now. I'm excited to see what their offense does with all that speed. Daniel Jones couldn't utilize that speed, didn't know what to do with it. Then you have Tyrod Taylor come in. You're like, wow, what a difference not having Daniel Jones on the field makes. And then Tommy DeVito comes in, is already playing better than someone like Kenny Pickett. You don't have to pay him that much money. And then you're like, oh, this guy makes sense. And then you start looking around at his agent like, hey, no one around the NFL gave us any respect. We're going to put some respect on the DeVito name. And then it's starting to be like a mob movie now unfolding in New York with the Giants. Then he was Danny DeVito, Tommy DeVito. And then suddenly it's Always Sunny in New York with the Giants now. And then Tommy DeVito is actually showing up against a good Packers team who just beat the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football with their coming out party. And then what does he do? Oh, I'm going to go out there, outplay Jordan Love. And then all he does is win. And then when you have a guy you're only paying $400,000, like, okay, let's see if a sucker wants to trade for Daniel Jones. Because at this point, I don't know why you would play Daniel Jones over Danny DeVito ever again. Because it took Daniel Jones 4 professional years to be like, oh, maybe there's something there. Where Danny DeVito, you're like, oh, that guy actually has a good feel for the game and can, do that thing that's, what's the quarterback supposed to do? Oh, throw the ball. Yeah.
Yeah, he can complete passes down the field.
Yeah.
It's amazing because last year, I think the stat was like they only had 8 attempted passes over 20 yards.
That's
last
ridiculous.
Year. I'm like, okay, well, they're down. Let's say they're down 10 points, right? And they need to get points quick. You can't throw the ball. You can't do screens. You can't do slants. Like, you got to push the ball down the field. Tommy DeVito can. Tommy DeVito looked good. His numbers are pretty gaudy too. I think it's 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, QBR in the hundreds. Like, that'll get it done in the NFL. 62% completion rating. Like, if this is the new Giants, then I can actually get on board with this team.
Yeah. So after this game, the Giants are now 5-8. And they enter the playoff race where they're only a game back from the Seahawks, Rams, and Packers. Do you think they have a chance to make a run with Tommy DeVito and that defense stepping up now, or do you think it's just a nice story?
I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I think that they can finish, say, 7-10 or 9-8. Probably closer to like 8-9 would be probably a good prediction for them. Had they not have started so poorly, I would have been more optimistic. I got to see their schedule. We'll look at it in the preview, but I think this Giants team, like, they're going to be playing a lot of upset ball. I think they can still win a couple of games. 4 more games left. I see them going probably 2-2 most likely.
Yeah.
And finishing 7-10, but entering with a bunch of optimism. If I'm Brian Daboll, I'm like, all right, get Daniel Jones out of here. Pay us. Maybe the Patriots are suckers. Maybe the
that's a perfect spot for him.
Or maybe the Titans
the
are
Panthers.
Suckers. The Panther, maybe.
Let's bring in Daniel Jones.
That'll fix us. I think there's going to be a very small market for Daniel Jones, especially with that awful contract.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe the Steelers or a team like that would take a chance on him, but I don't know who would take a chance on Daniel Jones. And that was the thing with Giants fans. And the last thing I'll say is they're like, oh, well, you don't want us to pay Daniel Jones. So, like, who do you want? I'm like, anyone. Literally anyone. This guy like took so long to actually show any promise in the NFL. I'm like, any quarterback would be better, and I'll even take an undrafted quarterback over him. Step in Danny DeVito. You want to talk about any quarterback would be better than Daniel Jones? Literally, you grabbed a guy off the street like, hey, you live in New Jersey. Do you want to try out for the team? Like, yes, you have to give me some respect and start me when I have a chance. Or my agent, he has a man for everything. You know what that means. Like, okay, yeah, we'll give you a shot. I like the mentality. And then Danny DeVito comes out there, and then potential franchise quarterback, and especially in a dysfunctional team with the Giants, it's just good to see, because I like seeing, like, even if we hate on a team like the Giants, I want everyone to be good because it's more interesting.
It's so much more to like this jersey. Like, they play in East Rutherford. He's been in New Jersey his whole life. He played at Syracuse, which I know is not in New Jersey, but it's in New York at least. He fits the culture. New Jersey, like, they've really started to embrace him there too. Like, I think the fans are going to want Tommy DeVito to start. And I don't want to see a team like the Giants with Daniel Jones, who can't throw the ball down the field and it's just slants and they score 12 points a game. Like, I want to see a team put up 24 points and get Saquon going. And I can see Wan'Dale Robinson live up to his potential, and Jalen Hyatt. And eventually when Darren Waller comes back, he perform. Like, that's so much better for the NFL and for the city of New York / New Jersey. Like, I want that for the Giants. I don't hate the Giants because I hate New York or anything. I hate him because Daniel Jones is a wimp and he can't throw the ball down the field. Where in this field, it's like, okay, I can get behind a team like this.
Do you think, yeah, because I think now if Daniel Jones starts doing those type of things, and if they even have the guts to start him again, or not the guts, the lack of brains to start Daniel Jones again, as soon as he starts being Daniel Jones, boo, we want DeVito.
Yep.
We want DeVito. Like,
Yep.
they're going to turn on Daniel Jones fast now. So now he's probably like, oh, all right, well, I got my money. So I guess I scam the Giants in $160 million. But good for the Giants. Got a great win on Monday Night Football. And then the ball in his hands, 1 minute left, marches them down the field to win that game. Absolutely electric stuff out of the New York Giants. And then last game we had, before today, it was since 2016 that a team had blown a 2-touchdown lead with 3 minutes left, and that was the Houston Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts. Will now enter in the Miami Dolphins versus the Tennessee Titans, and then Miami gets a pick six to start the game. I'm like, okay, well, their offense hasn't scored yet. Let's see how the Titans defense is going to match up with them. And then Mike Vrabel, absolute chess match versus the Miami Dolphins. And then, all right, you started DeAndre Hopkins, been a disappointment. And I was like, nah, stick with DeAndre. He'll be great this game. With like 1 minute left, he had 10 yards. And then with no time left in the second half, he had over 100 yards here. And then Will Levis in this game, making himself a household name. Do you think this is more on Mike Vrabel, Will Levis, and their game plan? Or do you think this is more, what are the Miami Dolphins without Tyreek Hill?
I think it speaks to the Dolphins here because Tyreek hurt his ankle in the beginning of the game. He was out for a good stretch of the game, and they mustered up 3 points for a majority of it. And then the Titans offense, like, I think that you can see elements of Will Levis there. Like, you can see it. Yeah. He was able to get DeAndre involved. I think he ended up with 130 receiving yards to end it. And I give him a lot of credit for coming back. But on the other side of the ball, without Tyreek Hill, that offense, I'll say it, sucks.
Yeah.
You have Jalen Waddle there too. So it's not like you don't have speed there. You have Devon Achane, you have Raheem Mostert, and they did run the ball well. But Tua just can't make those big throws when it matters. And then on the other side of the ball, which is probably the most disappointing for them, because you have players like Bradley Chubb and Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard, like, to play as badly as you did, like, you blow a 2-touchdown lead in the last 3 minutes, which speaks to your offense and your defense, because they marched down the field. D-Hop had a big catch, and then a couple of runs from Derrick Henry gets you in there. And then they get the ball back, the Dolphins, that is. They don't do anything on offense, and then they get the ball back again, and they win. So 767 straight games where a team has a 2-touchdown lead the last 3 minutes, 767-0, and now it is 167. So I think it speaks to the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins, they remind me of the Vikings of last year, where you look at them, you're like, yes, they're a good team. Yes, there's talent, but I also think that in the playoffs, they're going to be a first-round exit. And this game solidifies it for me. Their defense sucks. Their offense without Tyreek Hill doesn't exist. And Tua's not the guy at the end of the day. No disrespect. I think Tua's a great person, but he's not the answer for them. And I think he holds back the Dolphins.
Yeah. Do you think, like, Tua, do you even put him on the same class of, like, enter in a young Dak Prescott in his rookie year?
No, not even close. No, I think Dak Prescott, he's got a big arm. He had a bit of a swagger in the rookie year as well. Yeah. I would definitely, like, rookie Dak Prescott, I would take over him 100%.
Would you take Will Levis over Tua? Because this was impressive. Because for me, it's like the Titans' weapons here. You come in, the Titans' offensive line is banged up. Derrick Henry only rushed for 34 yards with 17 carries. And then we're waiting for DeAndre Hopkins to come alive. And then ever since that rift that they had on the sideline last week, it seems like DeAndre was like, oh, this kid's like fine going at me. I like his competitive spirit. And then Will Levis wills his team into the game, throwing to Tajay Spears, to Chiggy Aquanu, DeAndre Hopkins, Westbrook Nikine, like players like that no one's heard of outside of DeAndre Hopkins. And the Titans' weapons outside of him and Derrick Henry are like, if you sim Madden in 10 years and like all the auto-generated players there. So for me, with Will Levis playing terrible for a few stretch of games, and he's a rookie, it's like no problem there. The fact that he's been able to bounce back seemingly in the past 2 weeks and he's figured something out.
Yeah, I think that he's a gamer, and I want to see them next year, whether they keep DeAndre Hopkins or whether he leaves. I think that if they can establish their offensive line, one of the big things about the Titans this offseason was they had to make a few cuts. Like they had to cut their biggest offensive lineman. One of them retired. And then from there, like they lost a lot of key wide receiver depth, and now they're rocking with Traylon Burks, who's a bust at this point. I hate to say it because of his injuries. If they could get him an offensive line, get somebody to replace Derrick Henry appropriately. Tajay Spears looked pretty good in this game. And then get a solid receiver core. Like I've seen enough flashes from Will Levis where I think like it would be appropriate to give him a year, because his first game he threw for 4 touchdowns, had a struggling stretch, but then this game, like I think it shows that he's a competitor.
Yeah.
It shows that he's got a little bit of dog in him, and that he can make some big throws. He's got a big arm, and I think he's got a certain swagger that kind of fits Tennessee a little bit. So I see it. I think that we should give him an opportunity. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 quarterback, but anything's possible. I mean, we've seen crazier things, so I'd give him a chance.
You look more competitive than I've ever seen Justin Herbert look, that's for sure. Because like with Will Levis, I kind of saw him as like a Jameis Winston type of guy, but with this game, the fact that he's struggled the way he has, like most quarterbacks down 2 touchdowns to the Miami Dolphins, like, okay, let me pack it in. The fact that he kept pushing there, and then I looked at you, I was like, well, Tennessee has made Miami go 3 and out a few times here. They could still potentially win it. And then you have Mike Vrabel, who's like, I don't care if we win this game because we're going to the playoffs. I just want to give my team some confidence. And then he has the stones to go out there, go for 2 in this game, and then ends up getting that. And then coaches a magnificent game on defense versus the Miami Dolphins. And then this 27-28 score is misleading because the Miami Dolphins only scored 20 points. One of those was just a bad Will Levis play where he was looking to throw a screen, and then the linebacker kind of got caught up there and he just didn't see him there, and it was a touchdown, and it was a bad rookie mistake, but he was able to bring them to life with DeAndre Hopkins at the end of the first half. So I think this was the game where Will Levis earned a shot to be a starter full time next year, because if Tannehill or someone else was playing, I think they would have been fine just packing it in. But Will Levis is like, no, I have a career I'm playing for. I have a career on the line. And then on the other side of the field with Miami, I was like, what is this offense? Like, why are we bragging about having the fastest wide receiver duo in the league and we're going to throw out routes and screens? Like, how are we not pushing the ball down the field? And then the run game shows up in spots, but it's still way too inconsistent when you have Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. And I know they want to get the run game going, and it definitely should be able to get going and carry you when Tyreek Hill is not there. This offense should not look anemic when Tyreek Hill is not on the field, which is why he is the MVP in my mind, because I think without him, Miami would be a 500 to sub 500 team at this point, because even with him, they can't beat winning teams. And he's someone who's helped build a culture in Miami, but your defense doesn't show up in big spots. And then Tua just can't push the ball down the field. And there's too many times where he's just flat out missed receivers, where there's an overthrown guy here, overthrows Devon Achane, and it looked very Jimmy Garoppolo-esque in San Francisco when he was overthrowing Emmanuel Sanders there. So for Miami, it's like, this was a game where Will Levis is like, this is him, where he earned a starting job next year. This is a game for Mike McDaniels where I'm like, this is a game where I'm like, oh, Tua may have lost his job next year, and may be looking elsewhere, because this is a guy who he's in the same draft as Herbert. Herbert got paid, same draft as Burrow. You're not paying this guy over $100 million to do what exactly?
Yeah, I don't think there's really an appropriate, like, maybe you pay him like a Jimmy Garoppolo contract, like 3 years, $100 million. But like, if I'm the Dolphins, like, not only does he have the concussion baggage as well, which it's unfortunate that that's a situation for him, but like, he's in a similar situation as Brock Purdy, although I think Brock Purdy has a much better case for him. Is like, He doesn't have the biggest arm. He has an injury history. And I think that if you were to pay him top quarterback money, you would regret it pretty quickly because I look at other quarterbacks that are available in free agency next year. If I'm the Dolphins, I look at Kirk Cousins specifically. So I think Kirk Cousins fits in here perfectly for them. They have a run game and they have two dynamic receivers. You put Kirk Cousins on this team, this Dolphins team wins that game 100%.
How different do you think the Colts would be with Tua instead of Gardner Minshew?
I don't know. I don't think it's that great. I think they actually
take a step back.
Maybe take a step back in that game.
Yeah.
In that team, I should say.
Because I feel like Gardner has more like hype, he brings to a franchise. He brings like more franchise changing stuff. So it's like if it's between like Tua and having to pay him a bunch of money or Gardner Minshew may be available and I could try him out for a starter on my team. Like I know Tyreek Hill likes Tua a lot. And then whenever he's asked about potentially being an MVP this year, he's like, we already have an MVP and it's Tua on our team. Like clearly it's not, because whenever you're not on the field, that's when he needs to step up and be valuable. And then you have Jalen Waddle there. You have Jeff Wilson, who made an incredible catch in this game. You have Smythe at tight end. You have two good running backs. You have Mike McDaniels, who can only coach so much. But how is this team, when it comes down to it and we need a big play, look like the Giants offense where we're running a bunch of short routes and screens where we should just be pushing it down the field?
Yeah. And I don't believe in his arm. I don't believe in his accuracy. It's not that I like I said, I like Tua the person at the end of the day, but I just don't trust the Dolphins. Their defense is deceptive and their offense, like you move Tyreek from the equation, their offense is middle of the pack at best.
Yeah.
And they have the talent. Like Jalen Waddle could be a number one somewhere else easily.
Yeah.
So I think that they should look somewhere else because I think that he could be holding them back.
Yeah, I think he could definitely be holding them back at some points. It's going to be a Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco situation. It's going to be a Jared Goff with the Rams situation where you're eventually going to have to move on there. But we have recapped every single game, so you know what happened this week. You know the major storylines coming out of it. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. Have the full podcast up there for the recap. It's been doing really well so far. Appreciate your support. Tyler, shout out to you for being our #1 fan on Spotify this year. And then subscribers, we're almost to 500, so we're making that push, and then it'll be 1,000 after that. Watch time has been right on pace with that, so make sure you check us out on YouTube, Instagram, social media, at Brick Nation Media is a YouTube, and then Brickyard Podcast, wherever you stream yours.